Boston Public Radio live from
Call for peace in Israel, where most people support the war after the deadly October 7th attacks by Hamas on Israel. Omri Gorin was passing out flyers that said, "Only peace will bring security." He says the war only serves the political interests of Hamas in Gaza and Israel's far-right government led by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, also known as Bibi.
The war is bad for Israelis and Palestinians. The war is good for the Hamas and Bibi.
Civil rights lawyers had to seek a court order to hold the anti-war protests. Aya Batrawi, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
Frigid weather is spreading across the U.S. Wind chill advisories are posted from Montana well south into Florida. It's below freezing today in Nashville, Tennessee. Will Compton is with the outreach group Open Table Nashville. He says volunteers are offering rides to people who are homeless to get them to safety.
People who are poor and people who are homeless are getting hit the hardest. Branches of the public library have been closed, which is an essential day shelter for our friends on the street.
On the West Coast, a new winter storm is bringing ice and snow to the region. A judge in Georgia has scheduled a February hearing. It's to examine allegations being made against the district attorney of Fulton County and a special prosecutor. They're investigating the election interference case against former President Donald Trump. The two are accused of having an improper relationship and mishandling public funds. From member station WABE in Atlanta, Sam Greenglass has more.
The unsubstantiated accusations came to light in a filing by one of former President Trump's co-defendants, Michael Roman. Roman's lawyer didn't offer hard evidence that Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis and the special prosecutor had an improper relationship, but he called on a judge to disqualify Willis and dismiss the charges, saying such a conflict of interest taints the indictment. Willis has yet to directly address the claims, though she broadly defended herself in a speech last weekend at an Atlanta church. The judge gave Willis until February 2nd to respond and has set a February 15th hearing. If true, the claims could, at the very least, erode public trust in Willis and her case. For NPR News, I'm Sam Greenglass in Atlanta.
On Wall Street, the Dow is up 150 points. This is NPR.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Nearly 24 public schools in Newton are closed today because the teachers are on strike. The move comes after the teachers' union voted to authorize the strike yesterday, following more than a year of contract negotiations, which have centered around pay and other issues. In an open letter to several district officials to the union's website, Newton Teachers Association President Mike Ziles wrote that the committee hasn't budged on its financial offer, which leaves many of Newton's educators behind in pay compared to similar districts. Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley threw her support behind the teachers today, and Newton Mayor Ruth Ann Fuller calls it a sad day in Newton. Barnstable County using more of its federal COVID relief funds to support affordable housing in the region. This week, the county commissioners awarded $500,000 to help build 42 units in Bourne. Corey Fellows is with the Preservation Affordable Housing, one of the project's partners. He says construction is already underway.
We believe we're on track to deliver this project and have folks move in by around this time next year.
Local nonprofit Housing Assistance Corporation is also developing the project, which is called Cape View Way. Celtics look to remain undefeated at home tonight when they host the Denver Nuggets on the parquet. We may see a dusting of snow today, high in the upper 20s, cloudy and in the teens overnight, into the 20s tomorrow. And Jim and Margery are not at the BPL today. They are live in Manch, Vegas for the New Hampshire primary. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Walton Family Foundation, working to create access to opportunity for people and communities by tackling tough social and environmental problems. More information is at waltonfamilyfoundation.org.
You are listening to Boston Public Radio. As Henry just said, we are not at the library today. We are up here in Manchester, New Hampshire at the Doubletree Hotel. You are listening to us right from there, just days away from the 2024 primary. We are here today. We are here Monday and Tuesday. We're going to be here all weekend. Going to a Trump rally tomorrow night, Jim. I'm very excited about that. And we're going to be streaming each day on youtube.com/GBH News.
This is where you say hello, Jim. How are you?
Hello, Jim. How are you?
Hey, Margery. How are you?
I'm good.
Good. So the remaining 3 Republican candidates have made their cases to the voters ahead of Tuesday. Here's a little sound from recent rallies for DeSantis, Haley, and Trump in New Hampshire. And after each candidate, you'll hear a little bit from some of their supporters.
And people like Nikki Haley's team was saying, well, they're definitely going to be second, all this other stuff. You got to be second to go on. And I finished second. She didn't. I mean, that's just the reality. So
it's not politics. I think he's a true gentleman. His background speaks for himself, with his military experience.
Do we want more of the same, or do we want to go forward in a new direction? And more of the same is not just Joe Biden. More of the same is also Donald Trump.
Nikki Haley, I'm not an enthusiastic supporter of necessarily. It's more like who's left standing that I can vote for, because I think it's important to vote. And who can I vote for and keep Trump out?
A vote for Nikki Haley this Tuesday is a vote for Joe Biden and a Democrat Congress this November, because that's what's going to happen.
I'm leaning towards Donald Trump. I'm not crazy about him as a person, not looking for a husband or a friend, though. Looking for somebody who's going to improve the quality of Americans, the majority of Americans' lives.
I'm glad she's not looking for a husband or a friend. Our number is 877-301-8970. We have a lot of guests joining us today. Between the guests,
we're very excited.
We will take your calls on virtually anything. We'd love to speak to people from New Hampshire or anywhere else. If you're a GOP-er, how are you feeling about the options on the ballot on Tuesday? If you're a Democrat, are you considering switching, well, if you're an undeclared, I say, former Democrat, switching to vote for Donald Trump? And if you're voting in the Democratic primary, you're writing in Joe Biden, or are you going for Dean Phillips or Marianne Williamson? By the way, Phillips and Williamson will join us next week. Or you're writing in ceasefire. Number is 877-301-8970. Let me just say up front, this setting where we are is unbelievable. We are right off the lobby, this incredible location. Sadly, we just waved to a few of your listeners. Unfortunately, you cannot come in the studio. But what Margery and I talked about with our staff this morning, if you want to come to the glass wall, it's a whole glass wall, which Margery attempted to walk through this morning. Is that true, yes or no? Is that true?
I banged right into it.
Okay, she banged right into the glass.
I don't have 2 black eyes.
If you want to walk up to the
very
glass
graceful, Jim. I'm very graceful.
and look at us and make non-obscene gestures, you are welcome to do that. We're right off the lobby at the DoubleTree.
On YouTube, she said, wow, they built a real set. Indeed, they did. I mean, we have a bunch of great people working up here. They did build a real set. It's really kind of nice. I got all my papers organized. I don't mean to look too messy.
I wouldn't say organized. The number is 877-301-8970. You know that we've talked a lot this past few days in anticipation of coming here. Every 4 years, Margery and I have been here. And where the action generally is, other than the rallies, we're going to a Haley rally tonight. We're going to a Trump rally tomorrow night. The action is usually at the bar. At the DoubleTree. So Margery gets here a little later than I did. I got here, roughly dinner time. I go to the bar before the Haley town hall on CNN, and I go to the bar. This is a totally true story. And I'm looking around. I don't recognize any big media celebrities, so I was going to sort of, cozy up to kind of thing. So I look around the room and I say, so who's the most media dressed like person? And there's this guy who's looking really good, dressed beautifully at the bar, and I sit down next to him. And I start a conversation, and it's clear based on his politics to me that he's probably somebody from MSNBC who I just haven't watched because I watch CNN a little bit more. Turns out he owns a cement company in Nashua. So I struck out on that front. And then I leave the bar. This is the good news, actually. And I bumped into a woman. Her name is, apologies if she's listening, and I think she is, either Lena or Lisa. She says she's voting for Trump. And I said to her, again, she listens to her show. She was incredibly kind. It sounded really smart and informed. I said, so you really think he deserves a second term? You know what her answer was?
What?
No, he deserves a third term because he won in 2020. And we went on for that for a couple of minutes. So again, you and I say, how can they possibly believe this? Lena or Lisa is someone who believes it big time and apparently believes that Donald Trump actually should be the president right now if the election were not rigged. The number is 877-301-8970. Before we take a call or two, and guests are going to join us in a couple of minutes, I watched the CNN town hall last night with Jake Tapper.
Yeah, I heard it on the radio.
You heard it on the what'd you think of it?
Well, I think Nikki Haley is a very talented politician. I think she has a difficulty, and I don't know why, because I think even if you are a pretty bad white supremacists in the United States of America, you do concede that slavery was the cause of the Civil War. I don't know why she has such trouble saying that. She dances around that all the time. But she had a very good answer, I thought, about the age of Biden toward the end of the
Biden or Biden and Trump both? Because she usually says we don't want either to be an 80-year-old president.
It was Biden. The questioner asked her about Biden, said it was rude or she shouldn't have asked the question. I was in the car, so I wasn't writing it down. But essentially, she gave a very diplomatic answer. She just said that 280-year-olds is not really the way you want to go, and Trump is close to 80 himself, and it's a new generation. But she didn't back down from it at all. I mean, the question was kind of accusatory. How dare you make Biden's age an issue?
You think that takes courage to say that?
It's the way she said it,
an
Jim.
80-year-old man running the country?
It's not courage. It's the way she said it. She just has a lot of poise. She has a lot of she's a good politician.
She is
basically.
good, but well, except on the one issue which she continues to dance around. You touch on this. You know, the whole issue when she ignored slavery as a cause of the Civil War, and then a couple of days ago said it's not a racist country. It's never been a racist country. Jake Tapper asked her about this never been a racist country thing. Here's a little bit of what Nikki Haley had to say to him on CNN.
I will tell you, when you look at, the Declaration of Independence, it was that, men are created equal with unalienable rights, right? That was what we all knew. But what I look at it as is I was a brown girl that grew up in a small rural town. We had plenty of racism that we had to deal with. But my parents never said we lived in a racist country.
And she goes on to say the guys who drafted the Declaration of Independence, they really didn't intend any racism. And of course, I assume, as most of us know, I don't know what the precise number was, 40% of them owned slaves.
Right,
so,
yeah.
Again,
and you wonder what that's a fear of. I mean,
exactly. Who's she going to alienate if she acknowledges? Maybe she doesn't want to talk about it today, even though she should. What's wrong with saying?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't get that. But again, she's talented, and she's just hoping to do well up here. And
oh, you think so?
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I mean, Trump is supposedly going to win, but there are political estimates that if she gets up to 30% of the vote, that's huge for her. Now we'll see if that actually happens.
Well, we have a couple of Haley supporters joining us in a little while. So I have a quiz for you. I know you hate quizzes, and then we'll get to the calls. How many Republicans in the last 50 years who ran for president have won both Iowa and New Hampshire? How many?
I think, didn't I just read it was just Gerald Ford?
That
was
is
the
correct.
Only one?
That is correct.
Gerald
and
Ford,
obviously
that's
went on to the nominee. But you would also agree that historically, New Hampshire is much more predictive of who ends up being the nominee. Not always right, but much more right than Iowa has historically been, correct?
I think McCain won back in 2008, though, didn't he? I think so.
In any case, let's take caller 2. Robert, you're calling us from Lowell. You're on Boston Public Radio. We're live at our studio in Manchester, New Hampshire. Welcome, Robert.
Hey, good morning, and thank you for taking the call. And I want to point out I'm almost in New Hampshire, so
that
I
counts.
Qualify for,
that's almost. That's good enough for us.
I talk to a lot of these folks in New Hampshire.
Okay, what's up?
Anyway, actually, there's really not that much up, but I just wanted to call and get your impression. And Margery actually just said it. I find Nikki Haley is extremely poised. She's very glib. I don't think she's particularly authentic, but I am never going to vote for either one of them. But I have to say, I kind of like her, but I would never vote for her.
Well, you know what's interesting? By the way, there's a guy who's going to join us in the last hour of the show today, Jim Merrill, who's a Republican strategist, worked on the Rubio for president campaign, worked on the Romney for president campaign. He's with Haley now. The word he uses in interviews is she's relatable.
Relatable.
And I have to say, of the three, she comes off as the most human, with the exception of these race answers, which are really uncomfortable. I think she is relatable.
Here's what else he said.
Robert,
she's relatable,
thanks for the call.
She's tough. She's charming. There's a steel there, too. I think people realize they're not just dealing with someone who doesn't have a backbone. And I guess that's what I was talking about when she answered the question, not being defensive, but just taking the offense on the remarks about Biden's age. But, we'll Trump is probably going to, as we know, going to win. As you said, he's had rallies every night.
I don't know that. I mean, while the Suffolk poll had him up 16 points, the Globe Suffolk poll, the American Research Group poll had him tied. And New Hampshire has a history of not being led around by the nose by Iowa. where Trump won in a landslide. So I don't know. By the way, Josh heard me say a minute ago that Margery walked into the glass.
I did.
She's not injured, by the way, and he's watching on YouTube, and he tweeted, texted, Margery is trying to break the glass ceiling, wall in this case, up there in New Hampshire, by walking into it. That is a very charitable kind of thing.
But it's going to be interesting going to the Trump rally tomorrow. He's had rallies almost every. Tuesday was in Atkinson, I think I wrote down. Wednesday, Portsmouth. Tonight's going to be in Concord. Tomorrow night's going to be that big hall down the street from here. That big.
Right across the street, actually.
It's a pretty big place. That's going to be Saturday. And there's usually a bunch of vendors outside, and I hope they're inside because it is a little cold up here. I went to the restroom a couple of minutes ago,
that's
Jim.
nice to hear.
I could see my own breath in there.
You
It
could,
was
really?
very cold. I think it's about 14 degrees up here.
Speaking of Donald Trump, did you hear the latest out of Roger Stone, key Trump ally, that there's tape of him saying time to do it, meaning assassinate Congressman Swalwell
I know.
and another politician. It's just, it is really frightening. We're going to talk to a guy who was a Republican candidate for president until the end of Iowa. That's Asa Hutchinson, former governor of Arkansas. I'm curious what kind of blowback he got by having the courage, a la Chris Christie, to criticize what Donald Trump's candidacy. Nancy, you're in Derry, New Hampshire. We love Derry. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi. So I've met you guys a couple times.
Great.
Following you ever since 96.9 FM Talk.
Love that.
But I was a resident of Massachusetts, and about a year and a half ago, and always was a Democrat, came up here, registered as an independent, and this is my thought process. Be interested to hear how somebody else thinks. I'm going to go to the primary. I'm going to vote for. I couldn't vote for DeSantis. There's no way. But I thought maybe I'll vote for Nikki Haley, even though that's not a good result either. But my point is to not vote for Trump, to take away a vote for him in the primary. And then on your way out, you re-register as an independent. And, of course, then I will vote for Biden in
Well, Nancy, I would
November.
suggest you stay tuned because our guest at 12 o'clock is this guy, Robert Schwartz. He's head of something called Pivot, and his organization exists specifically to encourage undeclared voters to do exactly what you're doing in New Hampshire, which is vote for Nikki Haley in an attempt to stop Donald Trump. So apparently you're not alone. Stick around, and you'll hear Schwartz at noon.
We're getting some texts from people who are doing exactly that, too, voting Republican in the primary for Nikki Haley as well.
Nancy, thanks.
And then they would have voted for Christie had he still been in the race, but then they're going to vote for him in the general. And somebody else just texted about Nikki Haley's reluctance to talk about slavery, that it would be very easy to just read the first couple of paragraphs of South Carolina's Articles of Secession. They explicitly cite slavery as a reason for success.
Well, she also brags, as she should, about taking down the Confederate flag, which makes it even odder than it is on its face. We've got to take a break.
We're going to take a break. We're going to be joined in just a couple of seconds by Caitlin Huey-Burns. She's next, the CBS National Correspondent. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from Manchester, New Hampshire.
Because you're reading text while this woman is doing it, because I'm afraid we're going to lose her.
The world brings you the biggest stories from around the globe each day.
But
And
just
starting
not
this
when we have a
week, you'll
guest
be
waiting
hearing a
online.
new sound from us. Two hosts in the studio.
I mean,
each day.
Hutchinson's not.
I'm Carol Hills.
And I'm Carolyn Beeler, joining Carol and Marco Werman as a co-host. More great journalism with a fresh new sound. That's This Week on the World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And the DeMoore McKim School of Business at Northeastern University, where MBA and master's degree students can build vital business skills through experience. northeastern.edu/business. And Safety Insurance, offering a variety of home insurance products to cover your home's increased value. You can ask an independent agent about safety insurance. Safety Insurance. We'll help you manage life's storms.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. It's actually Manchester, New Hampshire Public Radio today. Jim Browdy, Margery, live from our studio at believe she's in and around a Haley rally. Caitlin, it's great to meet you. Thanks so much for your time.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Well,
I am parked outside a diner where Haley is supposed to come and meet some voters.
Great.
Oh, okay. So the rally has not yet begun. Is that what you're telling me, Caitlin?
Yeah, she's basically doing some retail stops, stopping at diners and small venues throughout the day just to meet voters, encourage them to go out and vote, and then she's going to actually have a rally later tonight in Manchester.
So what's your sense? I mean, you've been up here for a while. You've got a focus group we're going to talk to you about in a second, but what's your sense of Haley's support?
Well, it's interesting to hear the caller that you just had because that is reflective of a lot of voters that I've been speaking with. Haley is really trying to target independent voters in New Hampshire who, who essentially will be interested in turning the page from Donald Trump. She talks a lot about this in her stump speech, moving past the drama and the chaos. She doesn't really name Trump by name all that much and criticizes his policies, but not him personally. But really trying to speak to those voters who are undeclared here in New Hampshire, who make up 40% of the electorate, who can vote in a Republican primary. And she's drawing some of that support. The question is what the intensity is. You talk to Trump supporters here, and they are full out supportive of him, not considering other candidates. And so can she kind of muscle through on the backs of independent or undeclared voters who want to turn the page, want their vote to be a vote against Trump? Are there enough of them? That kind of remains to be seen.
We're talking to Caitlin Huey-Burns from CBS News. Well, Caitlin, I would say, having watched a focus group with GOP voters you did up here the other day, there's at least one Trump voter who's not enthusiastic about Trump. Here's a little bit of Caitlin's interviews as part of CBS's America Decides. Here it is.
How many of you are excited about your choices this time around? No one. Who are you leaning towards?
I'm leaning towards Donald Trump. I'm not crazy about him as a person. Not looking for a husband or a friend, though.
Nikki Haley, I'm not an enthusiastic supporter of necessarily. It's more like who's left standing that I can vote for, because I think it's important to vote. And who can I vote for and keep Trump out?
It's just like having to pick the best from a bunch of not greats.
Not great. So have you encountered anybody who is looking for a husband or a friend there, Caitlin, or no?
That is probably one of my most favorite quotes that I've heard this cycle so far. And you all have covered New Hampshire primaries before. You know that people here take this vote so seriously.
Yeah.
It's such a small state in terms of being able to go and meet a candidate, to sit in a diner, have them walk in, shake their hand, ask them a question. They're long involved in this process. And I've covered a lot of these too. And what I'm finding this cycle is that people are just very unenthusiastic about the choices, I should say. We found that in the focus group. I've been hearing that from voters on the ground. There's usually such an intensity to these campaigns here. People are so excited to be able to be part of this process. They still are. Everybody I've been talking to is planning on voting, but they're just not as enthusiastic about a candidate than I've seen in elections past.
And you're talking about on both sides and not wild about Trump and Haley being still here, or DeSantis. They're not that wild about Biden either. This is coming from the Democrats as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because I have talked to several voters who, at the end of the day, they will likely vote for Biden, but reluctantly. I mean, I talked to a voter yesterday, for example, who's an undeclared independent, voted for Biden last time, but this time she's voting for Nikki Haley because she just wants something different, wants someone younger. And that's also something that Haley has been really hitting on the trail. She's been kind of tying Biden and Trump together as kind of, of the past, need to move on, have younger people, and kind of fresher faces here. So we'll see if that sticks, but there is potential for that kind of crossover, and something that Democrats will, know is a vulnerability for them later on as well.
Caitlin Huey-Burns, one of the things I'm surprised I have not heard, and we just got here last night, so we've only spoken to a handful of voters. We're going to do that a lot over the next couple of days. I think one of the best selling points for Haley, particularly for those who are not as appalled by Trump as Margery and I believe they should be, in terms of the threat to democracy and beyond, is Trump is virtually neck and neck in virtually every poll with Joe Biden. And there's that poll a week or so ago in which Nikki Haley, it's in her ads, beats Biden by 17 points. Have you heard people voice that, between the two of them, and DeSantis, by the way, if you're wondering why we're not talking about him, he's already left for South Carolina. He sort of put in a mandatory stop here. Are you surprised that isn't more determinative with Republican voters in New Hampshire, the electability issue?
The electability issue, I'm so glad you picked up on this because this is something I've been really interested in my reporting. I covered the 2020 primary on the Democratic side, and voters you had talked to in 2019, full year leading up to 2020, would always say to me that their number one priority was defeating Donald Trump. They wanted to find a candidate who could do that. So they were really putting a premium on electability. This time around, you talk to Republicans, and the difference is that a lot of Republican voters feel like Biden is beatable by anyone in the field. They look at the poll numbers and see his vulnerabilities and feel generally like he is beatable. Not all of them, but that's kind of what's driving a lot of this. And it's important to point to the polling. I mean, our CBS News polling is reflective of this, that Haley would, in a hypothetical matchup, beat Biden by a greater percentage than her rivals. And that's something that she has been talking about on the campaign trail, especially in the last few days, and especially as Donald Trump is trying to claim that she would have no chance. So that electability argument is something that I think New Hampshire voters may think about a little more strategically because New Hampshire is, of the early states, is the most competitive in a general election.
We're talking with Caitlin Huey-Burns from CBS. The joke used to be that when you came up here, these candidates to New Hampshire, that they do everything but change the kitty litter of people whose
Some
homes...
of them did change the kitty litter.
That's right. They were in the homes, these very small groups. You mentioned you're sitting outside a diner and Nikki Haley's going to be there, but there has to be a big different feel from this, not only because the Democrats aren't really here, although we're going to talk to people later about the write-in campaign for Biden and some people advocating
Phillips and Williamson, though. I mean, they're around.
That's right, but not the real big people. So it's not exactly the same, and so I wonder what people, how different the campaign is this time. I mean, Trump's holding all these rallies, but he's not doing any kitty litter. That's for sure.
Right, exactly. That's a fascinating element of this campaign, and when you really think about it, it is just a race between two people at this point. I mean, to your point, DeSantis has kind of ceded New Hampshire to Haley and Trump at this point. So it's really Haley versus Trump, and Trump, of course, has the luxury in many ways of not having to do any retail. I mean, we saw that in Iowa, for example, a state that traditionally is rooted in retail politics, especially trying to get out activists to turn out for you. He was able to skip all of that, flying in, doing rallies, flying out. He's been doing the same thing here in New Hampshire. It is important to note, however, that his campaign is much more robust, of course, than it was in 2016. Their ground efforts are much more robust at that level. But Haley is not, she has to do these retail stumps. She is not as well known. And I actually asked Governor Sununu about this yesterday. How can Trump be leading in a state where, you've been knocking on doors for Haley, you've been doing the retail. And he said, look, Trump is essentially the incumbent, if you think about it. And, he's so well known, of course, so he doesn't have to do those kinds of things. But he still made the point that, which, you can take for what it is, that even though Trump is kind of running as the incumbent, he's still, getting 50-something support at some point. So there is room, his opponents say, for someone else. The issue is that support is kind of divided.
Caitlin, I'd love to see him change kitty litter, actually. We only have 30 seconds before you go. What diner are you sitting outside that Haley's going to show up? What's the diner?
We are at Marianne's Diner in Merrimack.
Heard great things.
In
Enjoy
Merrimack,
it. Corned
New
beef hash in
Hampshire.
New Hampshire is better than any place I've ever had it. Caitlin, it's great to meet you. Your reporting is great. Thanks for your time. We really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you very, very much for being with us. We really appreciate it. Have fun at the rally. We're speaking with Caitlin Huey-Burns. She is a CBS correspondent, political correspondent for CBS News.
It's not a rally. It's a diner. They're having breakfast.
Okay. It's a What do you want to call something in a diner, Jim?
I'd call it a diner. A
group-
visit to
a
a
group
diner
event,
is
a
what I
visit.
call
Okay.
it. We're joined now by Asa Hutchinson, a former staffer for George W. Bush, former congressman, former governor of Arkansas. I actually interviewed him a bunch of years ago when he was head of the DEA, where he had a security group larger than anything I've ever seen for anyone than a president. And obviously he's most recently a candidate for president on the Republican side, albeit briefly. Hutchinson and Christie stood out among their Republican colleagues as being people willing to be honest about how bad Donald Trump could be for this country and for his own party. Here's some sound of the governor calling out the Nikki Haley's and the Ron DeSantis's for not being more vocal about what a second term for Donald Trump would mean for the country. This is on ABC News.
They should speak the truth in reference to Donald Trump. He's dangerous for our country. He is self-centered at this point. He's looking out for himself. He's already set his agenda for a second term, which is to get even. It is about revenge, and this is not what we need in America.
Governor Hutchinson, thank you so much for calling in. We really appreciate your time.
Glad to. Good to be with you this morning.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for joining us. Before we get to the former president and his hold, which is almost magnetic on great swaths of the country, tell us, Governor, why did you decide to run in the first place?
Well, I decided to run because I see our nation at risk in terms of our border security, in terms of opioid abuse, and in terms of energy and in our economy. And my background fit with it perfectly in terms of I've had responsibilities to secure the border. I was head of the DEA, and I balanced the budget as governor and grew our economy. So that's one reason. And secondly, I was very concerned about the direction of the Republican Party and that we're going to lose in 2024 if we go down this path of Donald Trump trying to win again a race that he's lost before. That's what motivated me. It was an uphill fight, and I was not successful, so I leave it to others now.
You know, Governor Hutchinson, I would say that if there was an electorate tailored to the politics and policy of Asa Hutchinson, it would be the Iowa GOP. Obviously, it was not in the cards for you there. What does that say about the state of your party in 2024?
Well, in Iowa, of course, the evangelicals went toward Donald Trump, and there was an effort to dislodge that by Ron DeSantis and others, and not completely successful. And so that was a factor. And then those that wanted to go a different direction than Donald Trump, clearly, they moved toward Nikki Haley in the final days. And so they consolidated there. She had momentum. So those are some of the reasons that I didn't catch on in Iowa, even though we fought hard, and it was an opportunity for us from the standpoint of my background. Where do we go from here? I think that New Hampshire really is ground zero. All the donors, all the pundits, they always wanted to have a one-on-one matchup with Donald Trump and whoever the chief alternative is. Well, you've got that in New Hampshire. It's just a one-on-one race as a practical matter. And if we can't do well there, providing an alternative, then it's going to be hard to turn this around before we get to the convention.
So does that mean that you're a Haley supporter, Governor?
Well, I'm pulling for an alternative to Donald Trump. I haven't endorsed anyone yet, but obviously with Ron DeSantis concentrating on other states, I would love to see Nikki Haley prevail and do well in New Hampshire.
You know, I understand that totally, but one of the things that amazes me, and I wonder if it amazes you, is her chief supporter in New Hampshire, a very popular Governor Sununu, and Nikki Haley herself said if Haley does not prevail and Trump is the nominee, they'll vote for Donald Trump, despite everything they've said about him in the final. How does that strike you?
Well, very inconsistent, and no one was more vocal against Donald Trump than Governor Sununu. And now he's backing someone that has promised a pardon to him, that someone that has pledged that, would vote for him if he was a convicted felon. That is something that I have not done. In fact, obviously, I was one of the few candidates that said I wouldn't vote for him if he's a convicted felon.
We remember you not raising your hand at the debate. It was pretty dramatic, Governor, I should say.
I think that's challenging. That's while I'm pulling absolutely for Nikki Haley, obviously, I think about down the road, and it could be that everybody folds in support of Donald Trump, and I'm out there by myself. And so it could be some interesting developments over the next 6 months.
I'm always curious because you are a lifelong Republican. You come from
Yes.
Arkansas. You're not from one of these blue states like we are up here we're in New Hampshire today, but we're from Boston, obviously, a very Democratic state. What is your analysis? Because so many of us thought incorrectly that after the insurrection back in January, a while back now, that there would be a rejection of the former president. So what's going on, do you think?
Well, primarily, it's a matter of leadership. That after January 6th, you had then Speaker Kevin McCarthy and other leaders, including Nikki Haley, hold Donald Trump responsible and consider his political life at an end. But then in a matter of weeks, many of them went down to Mar-a-Lago and kissed the ring again and empowered him. And so leadership has made the decision we're better off with Trump with all of his flaws than not. I think that's short-sighted and wrong. And then the second reason is that you've had these charges starting with New York that the public had no confidence in. They looked political, and that strengthened Donald Trump, and that was hard for anyone to compete against.
Well, but as Mitt Romney said, Governor, I'm sure you've read or heard yesterday, he's not only appalled with Trump, but appalled, not his word, doesn't understand Republican voters who are willing to vote for somebody who's been found liable for rape in a trial in New York. Before you go, Governor Hutchinson, the Republican convention is in Milwaukee in mid-July. It's unclear what the timetable is, depending on what the Supreme Court does around the immunity claims that Donald Trump has pressed. If the convention happens shortly after Donald Trump has been convicted of felonies, what happens in Milwaukee?
Well, I think you will see many that will say this is too much. He's a failed nominee and they need to move a different direction. In fact, the polls show that even Republicans, if he's convicted, want to go a different direction. But you could just imagine he's going to say it's false charges and conviction and rigged system, and he's going to appeal it, and his loyalists are going to stand behind him. So I'm not, I hope that the convention would move another direction in that way, and that's why I've been sounding the alarm. But we'll see.
Before you go, very quick, when you go home at night, I've seen you on television a lot. I interviewed you, as I said, years ago when you were head of the DEA. You seem to be a pretty calm, level guy. When you go home at night and you see the state of this Trump campaign, his hold on the Republican Party, if the election were today, CNN's John King told us the other day he'd be the next president of the United States. Do you go home in despair? How do you handle what's happened to this party and this country?
Well, it's worrisome, and I don't lose too much sleep over anything. But whenever it comes to the fate of our democracy, I'm worried. And we're resilient in this country, and I'm optimistic that this is even the Republican Party will come back from the personal sway of Donald Trump. But it's painful. It's painful. I spent my life building the Republican Party in Arkansas. We used to be a blue state when Bill Clinton was governor, and we built the Republican Party, and I've been engaged in it. So I don't like to see it captured by someone that's about their personal ego and not the common good. So I sound the alarm. I think we can recover as a country, but this election is really important.
I want you to know, while you're not losing sleep, I'm losing sleep for you, Governor. So I'm making up. Governor Hutchinson, we really appreciate your time.
Thank you very, very much for joining us. We appreciate it.
All right. It's always good. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Good luck in the future.
We've been speaking with former Arkansas Governor and candidate for President Asa Hutchinson. After a quick break, we're going to talk with New Hampshire Public Radio's Chooljian, who's done this incredible podcast involving sexual misconduct and the recovery movement. We're going to talk about that. And we're also going to talk with local New Hampshire guy Josh Rogers, a media member too. They are next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio. We're going to be here today. We're going to be here.
For housing and education took center stage at Governor Maura Healey's first State of the Commonwealth address. But is the legislature on board? I'm Adam Riley. This week on Talking Politics, we size up Healey's vision and its prospects. Plus, we look ahead to the New Hampshire primary with Boston Public Radio's Jim Browdy and Margery Egan, who are in the Granite State. Talking Politics tonight at 7 on GBH2.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Heights Crossing Assisted Living in Brockton, helping seniors stay socially connected and independent with arts, fitness, learning programs, and a Compass Memory Support Neighborhood. More at heightscrossing.com. And the Lowell Institute, presenting a film screening of Inundation District January 20th at 7 at Suffolk University. A post-screening conversation will follow with filmmaker David Abel. More at lowelinstitute.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Margery Egan broadcasting live from Manchester, New Hampshire, just days away from primary. Josh Rogers is also here. He's New Hampshire Public Radio's senior political reporter. Josh, Lauren, great to have you. Good to see you both.
Thanks for having us. Thank you very much for coming up here. Great to see you again, Lauren. And we're going to start with you because we had you on around, it was the summertime. We were just establishing that. We thought it was, for a minute, I thought when you said 4 years, that was 4 years ago we started
No, that's
here.
me and Jim. That was our 4-year anniversary of us doing this.
Okay, so it was around your 13-step podcast. It was a look at New Hampshire's largest addiction treatment network and its founder, who used his position of power to sexually harass and assault many female employees and former clients. Not only did Lauren uncover this pattern of abuse, she and the station had been sued. Lauren had her own home vandalized by someone close, quote unquote, to Eric Spofford, and the very subject of her reporting. So expand upon, so for people who haven't listened, and they should listen, what happened in terms of the attacks on you, and where are we now?
Yeah, so last time I saw you, we were like right in the thick of the feds coming down with these big indictments about the people who were involved in the vandalism. So for those who haven't heard the podcast, it was both about this facility in New Hampshire, but also expanded. And we basically found that sexual misconduct, unfortunately, is very common in recovery spaces, whether it's residential treatment, sometimes in 12-step meetings. And that's where the term comes from, 13th stepping. It's like the step after people further in their recovery, taking advantage of people in early recovery. So that's obviously awful. But what I also learned while reporting it is that, you know, you can face some pretty serious consequences for coming forward. I mean, we all know coming forward with allegations of sexual misconduct is a difficult thing to do, but especially in these spaces where, you know, people with substance use disorder aren't taken seriously, aren't believed, and oftentimes it's people in a position of power that do the intimidating. And then here we are, a month after my initial story comes out, and yes, there was vandalism at my parents' home, a bunch of homes connected to me, and eventually mine. And so now we're at a point where the feds investigated. 4 men have been charged. And the latest update is that a man actually just pled guilty, one of the 4. And I believe another one may, but the other 2 we're still kind of waiting to see. So, yeah, that was pretty wild. I mean, I went to court and everything in the Seaport. That was nuts, and saw the close associate you mentioned. I went to when his name is Eric Labarge. He came in and was arraigned. And he's, you know, best friends with Eric Spofford, the man that I investigated. And, you know, we talk about this in the podcast, but, you know, we went to the courtroom, and when he comes out with the cuffs on, I mean, he stared me down. I mean, it's just been, it's been wild.
How
it's been
traumatizing
so wild.
was this whole experience? I don't mean the report. Well, the
And
reporting,
all of it, yeah.
but
And
the
your
living.
parents.
Yeah, how
I know.
traumatizing was this whole deal for you?
It's been a lot. I have a great therapist, Jim. Thank you so much.
So do I, actually.
Good.
Maybe, yeah, we can talk later.
Naomi.
I need one. Maybe you can give me a
I'll call her.
recommendation.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's been awful, but I think what's been really, really hard is that, like, not only am I managing my own stuff about this, but my sources have been impacted by it. And so when the vandalism happened, we had sources call me who were on the record and said, I'm out. Like, you can't protect me from stuff like this. So that was really hard. But, as things have gone forward, the lawsuit you mentioned, we got some good news in that recently that unfortunately, the judge ended up wanting to look at a lot of my notes as an in-camera review. So he was the only one who saw them. But as you can both imagine, that was super invasive.
Yeah.
But months after that happened, he just came out with an order in December saying there's absolutely no case here for defamation and that Lauren's investigation was accurate. And so that was good. And that's good for the sources to hear, too, that, like, not only was I listening to them, but we take this stuff super seriously.
Well, your reporting is brilliant and your courage is comparable to the quality of your reporting. So speaking of trauma, Josh, there's a primary here. I watched a report you did in mid-December, and it's almost exactly like we just had this CBS News reporter on, Caitlin Huey-Burns, who did this thing where the candidate said, we don't like any of these people, I'm voting for Trump. We don't like Haley, we're voting for Haley. Basically, the people you were talking to, you and a colleague, said, we're not crazy about any of these people. Has that changed in the months since?
I don't think it's changed a great deal. I mean, I think a lot of them see the primary, maybe accurately, maybe not, as sort of a foregone conclusion, and that we are headed for a Trump-Biden rematch, and that doesn't fill many hearts with gladness, and, like, understandably. And you can ask yourself what it says about us as a country that that's where we appear to be headed. And, if you think about that, it's hard to be terribly optimistic. There are voters out there who are enthusiastic about Trump, about Haley, some about Dean Phillips, and plenty are excited to write in Joe Biden. But, I mean, the reality is what it is.
Yeah, what's the Sununu effect been? Pretty popular governor has really glued himself and vice versa to Nikki Haley. Has there been an impact?
Well, we'll see. I mean, for her to win, certainly, and for her to be competitive, I mean, she probably has to replicate kind of a Sununu electorate, which is, people from the center of both parties. Sununu's not terribly popular with, like, hardcore base Republicans, and he's not popular with, like, real liberals, but the middle of our politics he's quite popular with, and that's hard to replicate. I mean, on paper you could do that in a primary. We have all the undeclared voters, and yes, they can pick their ballot, but we'll see. But it's his endorsements. I mean, it's also ought to be said that he's notoriously bad in terms of endorsing candidates. He endorsed the candidates he endorsed in 2022. They all lost Republican primaries. He couldn't even get the guy he wanted to be chairman of the state Republican Party elected.
So in that way, he's exactly like Donald Trump. If that's, if that is the case.
He also, I mean, has been noted probably, like, despite him out there making the case we shouldn't have Donald Trump, we need to leave him behind. He's tribally sufficiently a Republican that he will say, oh, yes, I will vote for him at the end of the day. And I think that takes some of the air out of this, too.
Yeah, we just asked Governor Hutchinson about that. And Nikki Haley has said the same thing, by the way, that she'll vote for Trump if he's the nominee of his party. Her party.
Josh, we're going to speak with Jennifer Horn a little bit later. Has been for a long time a big deal in the GOP up here. She's fed up with the party, as some Republicans are. But
I mean, some people do remember her when she ran for Congress as a Sarah Palin-style conservative. So, it's been a journey for her.
It's been a journey for her. That's fair, absolutely. But she has said that she thinks that if Nikki Haley comes close or wins, that Trump will just accuse Nikki Haley of cheating the election, of being fraudulent, and that this is going to be a tactic he's going to use all across the United States. I mean, what do you think about that?
I mean, I think that that's a possibility.
Yeah.
I mean, first we have to see if there's a race close enough that, he feels the need to do that. But, I mean, it's just one of the norms that he has sort of violated in our politics, that without real consequence, that you can challenge election results without foundation. You can say the justice system is rigged. You can do all the many things he has done, and it doesn't harm you with the voters you're seeking to get to the polls. And so it is weird.
You know, Lauren, we know you're not a political reporter, but you have obviously a deep New Hampshire connection. One of the things we used to love, you mentioned this earlier in the show, we would come up here as long as 25 years ago for primaries. You really did see people shaking everybody's hands. And we do and you know, people think it's BS. We'd be in the lobby of this hotel and who you're supporting. Well, I've only met Nikki Haley 9 times. Well, it wasn't Haley then, you know. I've met so-and-so 13 times. How do people in New Hampshire feel about the loss of that? I mean, as of the moment, Josh and others think it's Trump's to lose here. And Trump doesn't do any of that. He does huge rallies or hopes for huge rallies. How does New Hampshire feel about the loss of that person-to-person
I think
kind of
it
thing?
entirely depends on who you ask. Because if you ask people in the political class over here, I mean, this is like their bread and butter. Where you're standing right now, like they are ready every 4 years. They cannot wait to come into this building and do all the interviews and do all the things. I mean, this is how they, you know, get to the next 4 years. This is what propels a lot of investment into our political parties and investment into our journalism here. The primary makes us famous. And so for that, I think people really, like, certain people really love it. I think day-to-day voters, like, it depends. Some people, like, may not even vote. I mean, and I think that this idea that New Hampshire is special, it really just depends on who you ask.
I mean, candidates are doing less of what you
Even
described.
4
I mean,
years
it may
ago.
not
Trump
be. It
didn't
may
do that
not.
4 years ago either.
It may not behoove them to do so, but you know, it may be annoying to those of us who like to watch them interact with voters that there is less of that, and you know.
Right. Think about 2020. Trump just had a big, you know, like downtown Manchester rally. He didn't shake any hands. He
Well,
didn't
in
go
all
to a
fairness,
church.
though, so this doesn't become our usual anti-Trump show, which is almost every show. When Barack Obama was running, remember we went to that high school to hear him speak.
Oh, my God.
And while it was really dramatic, it was a high school with 1,000 people in
Right.
it, and we were pretty close. It was pretty electric, but
It was
he wasn't
very
doing
long lines,
He
too.
wasn't
Remember?
exactly. He wasn't
In
doing
the cold. Yeah.
It may have been. He wasn't doing door-to-door stuff either. In any case, Josh, what do people care about here? Do you know, I know it's hard to predict. It's hard to characterize that, but what are the issues that most people talk to you about?
I mean, people talk about the economy. Some voters will talk about foreign policy, particularly as they're sorting like Trump versus Haley, and do they want something more conventional, or are they comfortable with Trump?
How about immigration?
That is a
thing?
very driving issue. I mean, with you know, you look at the polling with Republican voters, it's a big deal. People see, you know, what you know is chaotic at the border, and that has been an issue. I can remember years ago watching John McCain when he was trying to broker an immigration deal. He came up and spoke at a New Hampshire House Republican fundraiser for members of the New Hampshire legislature, and I remember he said, you know, we need to have a deal on immigration, and you know, people walked out of the room, and you know, the border is something that galvanizes Republicans, and a lot of them will tell you that, you know, they believe if Trump gets back in there, you know, the wall will get built.
Just like he built it the first time. Yeah. Exactly.
We're talking with Lauren Chooljian. She's senior reporter and producer for New Hampshire Boston Public Radio, New Hampshire Public Radio, and Josh Rogers. He's a New Hampshire Public Radio senior political reporter. You know, I wonder. I'm like to think that abortion is going to be a big deal all across the country in this race. Nikki Haley is not pro-choice. Obviously, DeSantis is not. Trump is not. How much does that matter, do you think, up here?
Oh, I think it's a huge issue for Democrats. I mean, I think there's no doubt about that. I mean, I think that is, I mean, we saw that in the last elections, that was what motivated a lot of people to come out. But I think, you know.
But how about Republican women?
I mean, I think it depends on it depends on the person. I mean, I think for some people it is a huge galvanizing issue because it feels super personal. And personal issues are what drive people to the polls, even if it's snowing or raining or whatever. And so I could see that being an issue, but not, you know, for Democrats, I think it's even bigger.
I mean, certainly, you know, New Hampshire is one of the rare places where you can poll Republicans, and most Republicans are supportive of abortion rights here. And I have talked to plenty of Republicans who, even though Nikki Haley says she's unapologetically pro-life, who like her effort to, in her words, you know, not demonize the issue and recognize that there are personal considerations that go into it. And, you know, certainly early on, as she seemed to be rising here, a lot of voters I spoke with mentioned that in particular, and they liked the way she handled that.
A less harsh approach.
You know, can I ask briefly, you just mentioned, you were just talking about the abortion thing, right?
Yes.
Margery asked the question earlier in the show that, Josh, maybe you can answer. Last night on the CNN town hall in New Hampshire, was it Henniker? I think it was, where Jake Tapper and Haley she sort of doubled down, or at least didn't answer adequately, in my estimation, the whole issue about we've never been a racist country. Said, the Declaration of Independence, the people who drafted it, they didn't really intend that, even though a lot of them owned slaves. She didn't say that. I'm saying, who is the constituency that she's appealing to by avoiding talking about slavery as the cause of the Civil War and pretending like racism hasn't been baked into this country for a couple hundred years? Who needs to hear it that way?
I'm not certain of that. I've talked to several voters that have told me that they were put off. Somebody I know personally said, I was probably going to vote Haley, but I was put off by her comments on the Civil War and racism more generally. I personally think Nikki Haley, having observed her a lot, is that she's like a heavily scripted politician. And some of the thing that she said about slavery and the Civil War in Berlin was pretty much direct verbatim what she had told like a South Carolina blogger years before. So I do think that some of that may just be like, it queued up what was in her mind, but I don't know who she thinks she's appealing to.
We got to take a break.
We got to take a break, but really, really quick. We have about a minute left. I mean, I think in New Hampshire, Vermont, skiing. Does anybody care about climate change up here? Is anybody worried about the about the ski industry being no longer a big employer?
Oh, of course. Our boss recently was like, I got to see my kids ski meet yesterday because there was actually snow on the ground. Oh,
Republicans. I mean, Trump's climate change denier. Nikki Haley is not good at
Well, actually, a questioner at the CNN town hall said, I support you because you're the only candidate on the Republican side who's ever mentioned climate change.
Yeah.
She may not be up to your standards. 30 seconds. What's the best cheeseburger in this part of New Hampshire? Quick. Lauren. Come on, Josh. Help us out. Help us out. What do you mean, come on? What are you, vegan or something?
No.
Forget about climate change. Let's talk about cheeseburgers.
Okay, well, that's really disappointing because I'm an admirer of you too.
Listen. Lauren's got a situation.
You have 10 seconds.
Okay, quick, spit it out, Lauren.
I'm lactose intolerant. I can't eat cheeseburgers, but I'll give you Revelstoke Coffee in Concord is my favorite place to get a matcha.
Matcha.
God.
That's all I have.
Who cares about a matcha?
I do.
Lauren, it's great to see you.
It's
Josh, great to see you too.
We've
Thank
been
you both.
speaking with New Hampshire Public Radio's Lauren Chooljian and Josh Rogers. Thank you very, very much for joining us.
I don't even know what a matcha is,
After the
by the
news.
way.
I knew this would work.
We'll find out during the break, Jim. Robert Schwartz leads a super PAC and political activist group trying to get New Hampshire.
Yeah, more smart conversation about community issues is up ahead with Jim Browdy and Margery Egan on Boston Public Radio. Right after a news update from NPR. Stay with us here on GBH 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And The Huntington, presenting Stand Up If You're Here Tonight, a one-man, one-audience show at the intimate Masso Studio, 264 Huntington Avenue, starting January 20th. Tickets at huntingtontheater.org.
Plus, we'll talk with the co-founder of a new national PAC encouraging Democrats to vote in Republican.
Consulted for ways, blamed for fatal accidents in New York, Pennsylvania, and Mississippi. Tennessee, with the warmth forecast to persist until at least the end of January. Amy Held, NPR News.
President Biden's expected to sign off on legislation that'll now keep the government open through February. Yesterday, the U.S. House voted to advance the short-term funding extension. It passed, but with Republican votes split nearly 50-50. NPR's Eric McDaniel reports on the pressure the new House Speaker faces from hardline Republican opponents to the stopgap measures.
Speaker Mike Johnson, he's the leader of the House Republican caucus, obviously, and he's new on the job, right? He's about 90 days in, and he's relied on his sort of early days goodwill to set a bipartisan top-line spending target, which was a big deal in negotiations with other congressional leaders, and keep the lights on with these short-term bills. But both moves really kind of irked his anti-compromise members.
That's NPR's Eric McDaniel. Now to Israel's war with Hamas. Posts to social media claim that the Israeli military has exhumed bodies from a graveyard in Gaza. NPR's Jeff Brumfield has more on.
Cover the bodies of hostages when it has, quote, critical intelligence about where they are. In such cases, it says, it removes any remains thought to be hostages to conduct forensic analysis. The military said it would return any bodies if it found they were not hostages. Jeff Brumfield, NPR News.
The North Korean government says it has tested a drone that purportedly can carry out underwater attacks on Navy vessels and ports. Kim Jong-un's regime says it is responding to joint naval exercises that its southern rival carried out this week with Japan and the United States. From Washington, this is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Boston Public Radio live in New Hampshire today, and we'll be there through Tuesday, the day of the first primary in the country. They're in Manchester at the Doubletree Hotel Expo Center. And here's where the candidates are today. Donald Trump holds a rally in Concord at 7 tonight. Nikki Haley will be in Milford, New Hampshire at 4 and at a rally in Manchester at 6:30. Ron DeSantis heads to the Courtyard Marriott in Nashua at 4:45 today, and then he'll be hanging out at the Cara Irish Pub in Dover at 7:30. Dean Phillips will be in Concord, New Hampshire at 5, and Marianne Williamson is embarking on a dinner tour of Manchester today, starting at 2:45 this afternoon. Well, this cold weather has not been kind to people who own electric cars. We know one. At the Newton Service Plaza yesterday, Tesla owner Ryan McMullen said his average 30-minute charging time had climbed to 50 minutes.
It's slower to begin with, but when it's this cold, it's always significantly worse.
The longer charge times have led to lines at some of the stations. Mark Shieldrop with AAA Northeast says the cold weather also reduces the maximum driving range.
Your range loss is anywhere from about 20 to 40% in the worst case scenarios. That's because they're driving on the highway, they've got the heat on, maybe the batteries are cold as well.
AAA recommends that EV drivers plug in their vehicles overnight to keep that battery warm. And just a side note, gas has come down for the second consecutive week. Celtics look to remain undefeated tonight at home when they face Denver. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Made in Cookware. Made in Cookware is crafted by chefs for chefs and designed for restaurants and home kitchens around the world. Their cookware can be found at madeincookware.com. This is NPR.
He is Jim Browdy. I am Margery Egan. Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio, but we are not in Boston today at the Boston Public Library. We are broadcasting live today, Monday and Tuesday from Manchester, New Hampshire, just days away from the 2024 primary up here. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News, and we plan to see some familiar faces as well as some exciting new ones. Former White House Press Secretary and now MSNBC host, that is, Jen Psaki is going to join us. Chuck Todd, of course, Jen Psaki, I should have said. Chuck Todd, of course, he's going to be with us. NPR's Tamara Keith, Sandwich, New Hampshire's heartthrob, John Davidson
Well,
is going to
speaking
be
of
with us,
heartthrobs,
too.
you know who's also going to be with us
Scott
on Monday?
Brown.
Right, that rock and roller,
Yep,
Scott
rock and roller.
Brown, former United States Senator from Massachusetts. Before I introduce our next guest, we are taking calls throughout the show whenever there's a little bit of a break. And Laura in Peterborough, New Hampshire, you've been on for a while, so we figured we'd say hello to you. Hi, Laura. Hi, Laura.
Big fans.
Thanks.
Thank
Love
you
that.
very
Hello.
much.
What's
Thank
up?
you.
You're on.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to say that I was on Wednesday night went to a house party in Peterborough.
Yep.
And met Dean Phillips.
Oh.
And was very impressed. I am a former Yang ganger, and one of the things I liked about Yang was his strong belief that we needed to get big money out of the elections. And I think that should we ever do that, the people are going to have much more of a voice. And Dean stands by that.
Does he make a credible case that he could beat Joe Biden here, or you just like his politics regardless of his chances?
Well, you know, he needs to get his name out for sure. And I think he realizes that many people, myself included, feel that Joe did a great job on many things, but it's time for him to be the senior statesman and pass it on. And I really like Dean because he's young, he's got innovative ideas, and he reaches across the aisle, and he's got a long history of doing that.
Got it.
And that's super important.
Hey, Laura, by the way,
Especially
he's
where
going to be
we're at
on
right
with
now.
us
Yeah.
on Monday,
Yeah.
so make sure you listen. He's going to join us on the air.
Oh, I will.
Congressman
Yeah.
Phillips
I will.
is. Laura, thanks.
Thank you for being patient, and thank you for the call.
So in the first hour, when we were taking calls at the beginning, we had a caller from Derry, New Hampshire, by the name of Nancy, and here's what she had to say.
I'm going to go to the primary. I'm going to vote for. I couldn't vote for DeSantis. There's no way. But I thought maybe I'll vote for Nikki Haley, even though that's not
To
a good
stop Trump.
result either. But my point is to not vote for Trump, to take away a vote for him in the primary, and then on your way out, you re-register as an
Yep.
independent, and of course, then I will vote for Biden.
Well, there are a couple of guys joining us who are very happy to hear what Nancy had to say because this is part of the campaign they're leading. Joining us now at the desk are Robert Schwartz, co-founder of PrimaryPivot, and his colleague Ken Scheffler, who is the executive director and another co-founder, of the PrimaryPivot. My apologies, that's the name. It's a super PAC urging centrist and centrist-left voters to vote for Nikki Haley as a way to stop an ascendant Trump, just like Nancy said a minute ago. Robert and Ken, great to have you. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you very much, both of you gentlemen, for being here. So, Robert, explain a little bit more, elaborate on what Jim said. Why are you doing this and what's it about?
Yeah, so we are deeply concerned about the unique existential threat to our democracy that President Trump, former President Trump, represents. He tried to stop the peaceful transfer of power. Given that the Democratic primary is non-competitive, Dean Phillips actually has no chance of winning the primary. If people want to actually vote against Trump rather than try to embarrass our president, they should vote in the Republican primary against Trump. And then if they want to vote against him in the general election, they're welcome to do that too. So we are encouraging, we're actually focused on not only the 3,500 Democrats that became undeclared, but more importantly, the 130,000 undeclared voters that voted in the Democratic primary in 2020.
We should be just totally clear. If you're a Democrat and didn't switch to undeclared by October 6th, you can't do what Robert is suggesting. But if you did and you're a long-time undeclared, you can do exactly that. How's this going so far? I mean, we have that caller, Nancy. We were talking to a CBS News reporter up here, Caitlin Huey-Burns, and she said she's encountered people without any prompting from us who are doing exactly what Nancy said. How's it going?
You know, there's a long tradition of undeclared voters voting in primaries on both sides. It's perfectly legal. We are hearing a lot of excitement from people. It's hard to know how they'll come out on election day, but we're getting sign-ups on our website, and we're hoping for the best.
What is the website, by the way?
PrimaryPivot.org.
PrimaryPivot.org.
You know, Robert, I wanted to ask you about two countries that have had problems, not unlike ours, Nicaragua and Venezuela. I don't think we think about them that often, but I think in the United States, we think, oh, well, we've been around since the founders. We're a very strong democracy, yet losing that democracy is something voters on both sides, Trump people and Biden people, say they are worried about. Tell us why we're not so confident, that we shouldn't be so confident of having the same experiences that those other countries that we don't think about have.
Sure. So I've served overseas. I've worked extensively on Venezuela and Nicaragua. Venezuela had somebody, a popular paratrooper, who launched a coup against his long-standing democracy. He was arrested, and then he came back and won in a free and fair election. And then he, over many years, eroded that democracy, installed a court that was favorable to him, an electoral court, the legislature. And then when he died, Nicolas Maduro, equally autocratic, or if not more, took over. And so through a free and fair election, a dictator came to power. We have sanctioned the crap out of them, and you can't recover the democracy once it's lost, despite us trying every tool in the playbook. Nicaragua is even a closer parallel to Trump, because in Nicaragua, you had a dictator that served until 1990, Daniel Ortega, and then he kept trying to come back and win, and in 2006 he won a perfectly free and fair election, and he has basically destroyed the country. And I was working on Nicaragua when he arrested all 9 opponents. The legislature is 100% of his party. And the part that's the most parallel to me is, he lost and then he came back, and his only intent is to protect himself and his family. And that's the only thing he cares about. And when he passes away, his wife and his sons are going to take over. And so when I see Trump working on that, and I think about my own domestic democracy, the parallels are really too hard to ignore.
By the way, while we're not sure exactly what people meant, the heartening thing, we're going to talk to a Globe reporter in a minute. The Suffolk Globe poll on January 9th said the number one issue for voters in New Hampshire. Now, again, you don't know what they mean by it.
Exactly.
Is the future of democracy. We're talking to Robert Schwartz and Ken Scheffler, the co-founders of PrimaryPivot, which is attempting to get undeclared voters to strategically vote for Nikki Haley to stop Donald Trump. Has this ever worked anywhere? Every time we talk about this on the radio, I have to say we get really excited if we don't like the person who people like you are trying to block. I mean, we've done it probably 10 times through the years, and then election day comes and it never really materializes despite the best intentions. Is any evidence beyond New Hampshire that this has ever worked?
Yeah, so
this is Robert, by the way. Go ahead.
This is Robert. We have we actually have worked with Adrian Marsh, who led Claire McCaskill's campaign, which actually invested in the Republican primary to elect a weaker candidate that time, Todd Aiken, who then is famous for his legitimate rape.
The legitimate rape guy. I forgot about it. Yeah, go ahead.
So she invested and actually launched advertisements to get the weaker Republican. The DCCC famously did this to get Peter Meyer to remove
the Michigan guy.
And the Michigan guy. And then there were organizations affiliated with Adam Kinzinger and others that actually got Democratic votes to get rid of Madison Cawthorn in North Carolina. They got votes. They helped get Democratic votes in Georgia to get Brad Raffensperger elected. So we're not going to do this all on our own, but if the race is close, we can help bump. We can change it on the margin.
So Ken, go ahead.
Well, I would just add that I think this goes on often and it's not talked about. And we think in this case there's nothing to hide here. We're facing an autocrat. And we're going to be very upfront. It's perfectly within the legal rights of undeclared New Hampshire voters to vote in the primary. And it's also the moral thing to do because there's a real threat here.
Do you worry, speaking of I'm sorry,
I was just wondering, what would be a win in your estimation?
Yeah, so I'll take this one. Look, when we started this organization, Nikki Haley was under 5% and Ron DeSantis was 19, Trump was 47. If you would have asked us a couple months ago if Nikki Haley could, come within single digits, we would have been thrilled, right? She, has come back a long way and she has the momentum. And so we figure a single digit loss or a victory would be a huge win because instead of a coronation for Donald Trump, the media narrative afterwards will be that there's a competition.
Whenever anybody says, in my experience, a close second will be good, means they're convinced their candidate has no chance of winning.
That's not true.
So you think Haley could actually pull this thing out?
I think if it totally depends on the turnout. If there's about 320,000 people, yeah.
And Ken, one last thing for you. Are you worried about hurting Biden here? I mean, your buddy here, Robert, went out of his way to say Dean Phillips doesn't have a chance, and I assume you would have said Marianne Williamson doesn't have a chance. But Biden's not on the ballot. This is a write-in, which is an odd sort of thing. It's happened before. Obviously, he's not formally on the ballot. We all know this. But the president of the United States could be embarrassed if there was a small margin, even if he were to win, to get back to what Robert said. You are potentially taking votes, like that caller is going to vote for Joe Biden in the final. Does that worry you at all, taking votes away from Joe Biden?
It doesn't worry me. So Democrats still should, participate if they're interested in. I would say the DNC has said that on the Democratic side, the primary is meaningless and it's detrimental. And so, we're taking that to heart. We're saying to undeclared, it's like the Democratic primary is saying, the Democratic Party is saying, don't pay attention to this primary. Joe Biden, I'm sure everyone wants to win, but it's not a major priority to him.
With all due respect, we spoke to Governor Healy the other day, who was participating in the write-in campaign. We're interviewing Mayor Wu from Boston tomorrow. Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Governor Healy from Massachusetts, who's involved in the Biden write-in campaign. Mayor Wu is coming up to New Hampshire tomorrow to do it too. So they may say it's not a high priority. It wouldn't be it's a pretty high priority if it turns out that leaders of the party are participating, Robert.
Can I just say, Joe Biden is not campaigning here. He's not on the ballot. If Dean Phillips wins in New Hampshire, if he embarrasses Joe Biden, good for him. Dean Phillips isn't going to be the nominee because in South Carolina, 10 days later, Joe Biden's going to get 95% of the vote. Well, 80 to 90, let's call it that. Dean Phillips is not even campaigning in South Carolina. Dean Phillips is going to get crushed in South Carolina. He's polling at 1% nationally. So Dean Phillips's only objective is to embarrass our president. He has absolutely no chance of becoming president. So if you want to waste your vote on a guy that you like, go for it, but we're saying don't embarrass President Biden. Vote against the existential threat to our democracy.
PrimaryPivot.org. Is that what you said?
That's right.
Gentlemen, good luck. Thanks so much for your time.
And
We
good
appreciate
for you
it.
for making this effort. Thank you very much for being with us. We really
Thanks so much,
appreciate
guys.
it.
Thank you.
We've been speaking with Robert Schwartz. He's co-founder of Primary Pivot, a super PAC urging centrist and center-left voters to vote for Nikki Haley in order to stop the re-election of Donald Trump. And also with us is Ken Scheffler, who's executive director and co-founder of the Primary Pivot. Robert and Ken, thank you again for being with us. We're going to talk in just a couple of minutes with the Boston Globe reporter, who's a New Hampshire reporter, Stephen Porter. He's going to be with us in a couple of minutes.
But we're going to take some calls in
We
the
are.
interim. 877-301-8970. We don't care what perspective you're coming from. We'd love to talk to people from New Hampshire as well.
Did you see the man and woman out the window?
I did
in the
not.
Glass? Yeah. A couple from Manchester just walked by, and they were waving at us through the glass, Jim. I waved back. You paid no attention to them at all.
Well,
But
actually, that's
apparently-
because the husband in the group waved at me with one finger.
Oh.
So I thought
Okay.
I thought that was not exactly as
Well,
hospitable as maybe you do.
They heard we were on the air, and they came over here
Very
to
kind.
check us out.
Very
We're very,
kind.
very grateful that they did.
Can we take a couple of calls? Then we're going to talk to Stephen Porter, who's the
Mhm.
Globe's guy in New Hampshire. Chet in somewhere in Massachusetts. Welcome to the show. Hi. Chet,
Hi.
say something.
Hi.
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 Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hello?
Hi.
Okay. Hi,
Yeah,
Chet.
so-
Start talking.
hello?
Go ahead.
Yes, can you hear? Why is this not working?
I have no idea. We're going to put Chet on hold. He's been on hold a long time,
I'm
so we're
sorry,
going to try him
Chet.
again in a minute. Please
We'll
tell
try him again.
We're going to do it. Dan, you're in Cumberland, Rhode Island. Hello there, Dan.
Hey, how you doing, Jim and Margery? I wanted to speak to the point. Yeah, good. I wanted to speak about coming in a close second that's unexpected. Okay, a parallel situation was 1972. I worked for George McGovern, and I was against the Vietnam War. I campaigned for him in New Hampshire. He was expected to lose badly. He came in a close second to Senator Muskie, and the media declared it like a victory for him. He went on to win the nomination for president. And then I got very involved. I became a delegate from Rhode Island to the Democratic National Convention. I was only 20 years old, and it was a fabulous experience.
Chet,
doing
I
the
have a
whole
better
thing, but
example. Oh, it's not Chet, it's Dan. Dan, I have a better example than yours that I would have cited if I were you. Paul Tsongas, the
Okay.
former senator from Massachusetts, won the Democratic primary here in the Clinton year. Clinton was on every talk show the next morning called the Comeback Kid, even though he had lost the damn primary and everybody thought he won it. So spin matters. Dan, thank you for the call.
Jim,
I'm sorry.
Jim, I have one more. Okay,
What is it?
one more example? If
Yeah, sure.
Okay, quickly. 1968, Lyndon Johnson won the primary, but Eugene McCarthy came very close. Lyndon Johnson dropped out of the race later that month.
Yeah, I'm not sure it was because
So
of New
the
Hampshire, but we got it. Dan, thank you for the call and your history lesson. We appreciate it. 877-301-8970 is our number. Where are we going,
I think
colleagues?
I think Mr. Porter is here. Is
He
he
is
not?
here, but Mr. Porter, as we call him, is kind enough to wait. Is that correct, Mr. Porter? You're okay for a few minutes? He loves
there
when
he
people
is.
call him
He's over
Mr.
there.
Porter, by
Hi.
the way. Where are we going next? We're going to Diana. It's somewhere in New Hampshire. Diana, thank you for your call.
Hi, Diana.
Yes, hi, how are you?
Great, thanks for calling.
I
What's up?
listen to you guys all the time.
Thank
Oh,
you.
thank
Love
you.
you. But I am an undeclared, and I do that so that I can choose whether I'm going to choose the GOP ballot or the Democratic, and I'm
Yep.
definitely choosing GOP this time so that
Why?
I can vote for Haley.
And are you voting for
'Cause
Haley because you
God,
support her or because you want to stop Trump?
No, because I want to block Trump. 100%.
Well, that's what the pivot, what is it called? Primary Pivot. The people were just here, and that's their case. Diana, do you know other people doing what you're doing, or are you an outlier in your world?
No, I think there's quite a few that are going to do that.
Okay. Diana, thanks for
Hey,
listening.
Diana, thank you
Thanks for calling,
very
too.
much
We
for the
appreciate
call,
it.
and thank you for listening.
877-301-8970 8970. We'll take a couple
You know,
more calls.
this is Julia. She's from Cape Cod. Obviously, that's Massachusetts. But
I believe it is.
she
That's
says
correct.
she voted in the Republican primary in the last 2 presidential primaries, specifically to vote against Trump. So people are doing it in Massachusetts.
I
I guess,
meant to
too.
ask you every time we talk about this, and I should have done it when the gentlemen were here from Primary Pivot. Could you do that? I mean, I'd like to think I'm a strategic voter. This is not about Haley, by the way, so don't get upset, you Haley supporters. I'm not sure I could vote for somebody who I had strong disagreement with because I had stronger disagreement with the person against whom he or she was running. It just doesn't,
Well,
you know?
I mean, when you disagree with her on so many political issues, and I think that she's not exactly, I mean, she's dishonest about Trump.
Well, I just don't mean her. I don't mean her. I mean in any situation.
Well, it depends.
A strategic vote.
I don't know. Maybe I could, if depending
Maybe
on the
you could.
person. Yeah, but Wayne from Reading is saying the same thing again. It's Massachusetts. It's not New Hampshire. But he said just last month he changed his voter registration from Democrat to Independent for the very purpose of taking a GOP ballot and voting for Haley, and he also contributed to her campaign. But in the fall, he's going to vote for a Democrat.
Here's
as
a really
always.
good text on the other side of the issue. This is Jeremy in Maine.
Mhm.
Haley's policy goals are identical, says Jeremy, to Trump's, but she's more electable in a head-to-head against Biden. We mentioned that 17-point lead in a recent poll. Democrats propping her up in primaries against Trump is a capital letter horrible idea. We'll take one more. And by the way, if you're on the line, we'll get back to you at some point in a couple of minutes. We want to talk to some people here in our studio in Manchester, New Hampshire. Stephanie, you're in Bedford, New Hampshire. You're on Boston Public Radio out of Manchester. Hi.
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 Yeah, I'm an independent from Massachusetts that's moved to Bedford, New Hampshire
Oh, great.
in the fall. I'm going to be registering the day of the primary, and I've thought long and hard about this, and I do believe that Biden would beat Trump, but nobody's going to believe it. Well, I mean, half the people will believe it, and 3/4 of the Republicans will believe that it was stolen again. And it's just too high of a risk. I hate the idea that a Republican will be going in during this critical time, but I think preserving the democracy is more important than, preserving a lot of things. I know
So
that
what are you
there's a lot
doing?
of things at
So
risk.
what's the bottom line? What are you doing on
I'm going to
Tuesday?
vote for Haley.
You are for that. Wow,
I'm going to vote for Haley.
Wow, we're getting.
we've had a handful of
Getting a
people calling
groundswell
today
here.
doing this. Stephanie, thank you for your call and sharing your
Well,
vote with us.
we're going to go to her rally tonight, too.
We
We'll
are,
get a lot
in the
more.
hotel.
And it'll be interesting to see how many of them are independents or even Democrats that changed their vote prior to,
That's
October
interesting.
6th?
October 6th,
Yeah, we'll
yeah.
do that, Jim. I have my reporter's notebook,
You
so I
do?
can go around and interview people while you're looking for
You know
the
what's
perfect
great about doing a
cheeseburger.
remote, by the way, in addition to the fact we'd love coming
Mhm.
to New Hampshire for the primary, it's very hard to get the GBH pens back in Boston. Do you notice that? They're
got a
very
lot of them up
protective.
here. That's
but
right.
here, there are unlimited supplies of these excellent pens.
Okay, we're going to speak right now to Boston Globe, New Hampshire reporter Stephen Porter. He's going to join us in just a couple of minutes right here. We hope he can come over and join us now, actually.
No, we're
Come
taking
on.
a break, actually.
Well, yeah, but he can still come over. We're taking
I
a break.
think our colleagues know how to do this, Marjorie.
I'm just trying to assist them, Jim. Is
You
that
are?
all right? Is that all
Okay,
right with
fine.
you?
Yeah.
Okay. Stephen Porter is going to be with us, New Hampshire-based reporter for the Boston Globe. After a quick break, you're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from Manchester, New Hampshire, the Doubletree Hotel. I like the Doubletree Hotel.
I do too.
Today, Monday, and Tuesday. We'll be right back.
Ecuador is facing a crisis of drug gang violence.
¿Viniste a pie? ¿Viniste caminando o en bus?
One young migrant says he walked for 21 days to escape to the U.S. I'm Ari Shapiro, an immigrant's American dream and the reality on the ground on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Subaru of New England. This winter, you can explore New England in the all-wheel drive 2024 Subaru Forester. You can find your Subaru retailer at SubaruofNewEngland.com. And New England Recovery Center, providing inpatient addiction treatment in state-of-the-art facilities located in Westboro, Mass. Learn more at newenglandrecoverycenter.org or by calling 1-877-MY-REHAB.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim, Browdy, and Margery. And I think you've probably gotten the point that we're broadcasting live from Manchester, New Hampshire, the Doubletree Hotel. And if you come on by, well, you can't come into the studio. You could actually watch the show through the glass walls that Margery attempted to walk through earlier this morning.
I
She's
thought
not
I could
injured.
do it, but I couldn't.
I'm not, whatever. In any case, and we're streaming at youtube.com/GBH News, as we will be Monday and Tuesday when we're also here. We're now joined by Boston Globe, New Hampshire reporter Stephen Porter. Stephen, it's a pleasure to meet you. Thanks so much for being here.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you.
So tell us where we are. It's Friday, a couple of days away. Well, a few more than that, actually, but we're very close to the primary. So where do you see things right now?
Yeah, we are getting very close right now on the Republican side. Obviously, former President Trump is the front runner, so the big question is whether Nikki Haley can make an impressive finish compared to the front runner, former President Trump. And we'll see where Ron DeSantis lands as well. And then on the Democratic side, obviously, President Trump is our front runner, but we've got a couple other noteworthy candidates, Dean Phillips and Marianne Williamson, who are also all over the state.
You know, you guys, you with Emma Pladoff, your colleague, wrote a really interesting piece out of Durham. Trump was at a rally, and he used that line about immigrants that he's been criticized for, talking about immigrants, quote, poisoning the blood of our country, unquote. And I was fascinated by the response you got from a guy named Jamie Brazil that you interviewed about, he's a Trump guy, his interpretation of what people have said was a Hitlerian, if that's a word.
Yeah, I think so.
Adolf Hitler type quote. What did this gentleman say?
So that voter in particular said, look, I don't think that quote from Mr. Trump is being interpreted the way that he intended it. So the voter tried to dismiss it as not being particularly fascistic in its actual meaning. But there were also other voters we interviewed who said, yeah, absolutely, that they are poisoning the blood of our country. And so it was really interesting to kind of see different perspectives from Trump supporters here in New Hampshire, some of whom are really excited about the sometimes hateful rhetoric, others of whom are not, but say, look, I like his policies, and so I'm going to stay by his side.
And they'll dismiss some of the crazy things he said. I mean, this is reminiscent to me of 2016. People said, oh, well, he doesn't really mean that. Then it turns out he did mean 90% of what he said, but this voter was not willing to go along, didn't think poisoning the blood of our country was a good way to look at immigration. Nonetheless, he was dismissing those remarks too, in a sense.
Yeah, I think that's a fair reading of our story, and our objective with that piece was really to try to get kind of a lay of the land and take a sampling of where some of these Trump-supporting voters in New Hampshire stand at this point, because if you look at the polling, it looks like he has a diehard base of support here that's just likely to carry through to the actual voting.
You know, one of the things that I find relatively amazing is that a state like New Hampshire could elect a Governor Sununu who not only doesn't support Trump, even though incredibly he said he'd vote for him if he's the nominee, and pretty critical of Trump, and that same electorate supports Donald Trump for the presidency. What has the Sununu effect been for, obviously he endorsed Nikki Haley. Has there been an effect of the Sununu endorsement? Or is this like Kim Reynolds endorsed DeSantis in Iowa, and obviously it meant absolutely nothing. What's the Sununu effect here?
Well, I mean, I think the cop-out answer is we'll find out on Tuesday. But clearly Governor Sununu is very popular. He was reelected to a fourth term, decided not to seek a fifth, but probably could have easily won a fifth term. And so, he's really been going to bat for Nikki Haley, going around to various campaign stops. And I in one story, I referred to him as her chief evangelist, and I think that's absolutely the
perfect.
case. Yeah.
So, one of the things, Margie and I also don't understand, we've asked a few people today, but you have obviously a direct perspective covering New Hampshire for the Globe, is of the three candidates, I think it's fair to say, at least it's our opinion, the one who comes off as the most human, and to quote a supporter of hers who's going to be with us in the final hour, Jim Merrill, a Republican strategist up here, the most relatable. The one issue where she seems to have no ability to just say it is around issues of race. We all know about the deal with ignoring slavery as a cause for the Civil War, and then say, well, obviously I didn't have to say it because everybody knows it. And then sort of doubling down with this incredible quote the other day that this is not a racist country. It's never been a racist country. Last night, Jake Tapper and Henniker at that CNN town hall asked her about it. In fact, can we play that again? We played that early in the show, but for people who weren't listening in the first hour, when Tapper raised the issue with Haley about this has never been a racist country, here's what Governor Haley had to say.
First of all, I will tell you, when you look at, the Declaration of Independence, it was that, men are created equal with unalienable rights, right? That was what we all knew. But what I look at it as is I was a brown girl that grew up in a small rural town. We had plenty of racism that we had to deal with. But my parents never said we lived in a racist country.
She said it depresses people to say this racism in the country. She also went on to say that the drafters of the Declaration of Independence clearly didn't intend this. And as I said before, even though 30 to 40% of them were slave owners at the time, do the people of New Hampshire, are they okay? The Haley supporters who you've encountered, are they okay with this dodge, for lack of a better, my word, not yours, on issues of race and that kind of thing?
I mean, certainly there are some who are, but I did speak with a voter yesterday who is one of the undeclared voters who can choose to decide whether to vote in the Republican or the Democratic contest. And she said, look, I was thinking about voting for Nikki Haley. I voted for Biden in 2020, but, the past couple of weeks with some of these headlines that she's made,
Really?
This was at a Dean Phillips event, and this voter came out of the event with a Dean Phillips sign and a T-shirt and some posters, and she said, look, I'm excited to vote for Dean Phillips now because I can't get excited about Biden, and Nikki Haley has lost my support in the past couple of weeks. So we'll see how many voters end up in that particular group.
We have Dean Phillips with us on Monday. This is not intended to be disrespectful to the congressman, but almost nobody thinks he has a chance of beating Joe Biden in a primary. What do people tell you as to why they're embracing the Phillips candidacy?
Well, I think there are some people who are embracing Phillips or Marianne Williamson because they think that President Biden hasn't been progressive enough, hasn't been as aggressive in pursuing those left of center policies.
So they're making a statement.
I think some of them are certainly making a statement, and I think some of them are making a statement specifically for the primary. And just the fact that President Biden is not competing here, I think that for some of them it's just a matter of principle that say, hey, at least Dean Phillips is showing up at events here in New Hampshire, and so for that reason I'm going to vote for him, even though his odds of actually winning are quite slim.
We're talking to Steve. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Boston Globe, New Hampshire reporter Stephen Porter. There's a write-in effort for Biden that Jim just mentioned. Our Governor Maura Healey is involved in that. Lots of other people are obviously involved in that as well. There's also the write-in ceasefire. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so one of my colleagues, Amanda Goki, who's also based here in New Hampshire full-time as part of our reinvigorated New Hampshire Bureau, wrote specifically about the write-in ceasefire campaign. And this speaks to the idea of using the primary as a vehicle for messaging as opposed to actually, electing someone who can surpass President Biden. And so the central theme of this message is kind of telegraphing or sending a very clear signal to the Biden administration that he needs to take a more firm stance with Israeli leadership in order to bring an end to the fighting and the violence there around the Gaza Strip.
We should say that we have great respect for David Paleologos, who does the Suffolk poll for the Globe. And while he says that Trump still has a double-digit lead, even though it's slightly smaller than his last polling over Nikki Haley, the American Research Group had it as a tie. So most of the averages come in the low double digits. There are two things I'm curious to know if you've encountered. We mentioned before, I'm surprised other than in commercials, you don't hear I don't hear Nikki Haley talking more about the fact that she beats Joe Biden by far more than either of the other two Republican candidates. She does do it in her paid commercials, but that's it. And secondly, my perception of New Hampshire, both close up and reading about it, was always this contrarian thing. And Donald Trump wins the biggest victory in a contested caucus in the history of Iowa. And I don't hear at all this notion is, well, we don't want this to be over come Tuesday night. And a lot of experts say if Trump wins both primaries and he's way ahead in the primary in the caucus and he's way ahead in South Carolina, are either of these things at play, a reaction to Iowa or a reaction to her having the largest lead over Joe Biden?
Well, I think one of the really interesting lines of messaging that we've seen from Nikki Haley recently is this idea that Trump and Biden are essentially the same, and that she's running against both of them and trying to link those together. And I've been thinking a lot about that in the past few days because I think that she's trying to get to a point where she can even compete in the general election. And so in order to do that, she has to figure out a way to perhaps, campaign against Trump without really acknowledging Ron DeSantis in the race, but also finding a way to not totally alienate Trump supporters in the process so that she can set herself up for victory in a general election if she even makes it that far. So, I don't know.
How about this reaction in Iowa, though, that it's sort of a coronation after Trump's, he deserves credit for this. He had a crushing, historic victory in Iowa. Is there not this feeling we don't want to just rubber stamp it and end this process Tuesday night?
Well, I think that's a fair question, and I think that if Nikki Haley doesn't get the crazy awesome conclusion that she's hoping for, then we might see this being effectively the end of the road, even if there are still some more things to play out from after New Hampshire. But I think we're pretty close.
So we're going to be going to the Nikki Haley rally tonight, and there's going to be a rally for Trump tomorrow night just down the street here. So. What's the difference between the two? What do you? I mean, I've been to Trump rallies before. A lot of T-shirts with "bosomy woman" on them and that kind of stuff. So maybe we'll see more of that tomorrow night. But tell us about those. What you hear about those kind of differences between the people who show up at those things and the atmosphere.
Sure. So. I've been to Nikki Haley town halls here in New Hampshire throughout the process, and I've been to Donald Trump rallies in New Hampshire. And so I do think that Donald Trump really leans into the rally-type atmosphere.
Yes.
I have not seen the particular T-shirts that you're referring to, but there are typically lots of, red, white, and blue, lots of color, lots of Trump hats, and a very enthusiastic crowd. Whereas Nikki Haley has really, over the past year or 11 months, kind of refined her formula of a town hall environment where she comes in, gives a version of her stump speech, takes 4 questions, and I do mean 4, from the audience.
Really?
I have been to a couple of town halls where it was exactly 4 questions.
Is that really true? That is amazing.
Yep.
Wow. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No worries.
That's really amazing.
Yeah. Is it a time thing, or she just would really not rather be challenged on anything?
Well, I think that, in the course of the actual event, when you combine 4 substantive answers to questions with a stump speech,
answers.
It makes for a full event. And she says, okay, I checked that box. I'm moving on to the next event. And so I think a lot of times it works.
Okay. Do you think they'll do the vendors outside or inside down the street in New Hampshire tomorrow night?
The merch, the Trump merchandise.
The Trump merchandise. You think it's going to be outside or inside the arena tomorrow night?
Probably both.
Okay, good, because it's going to be cold tomorrow night. I'd rather be
Marjorie wants
inside.
to buy a few of those bosomy T-shirts for friends back home. Stephen, it's a pleasure to meet you.
Thanks for having me.
Congratulations.
Hey, may I ask you one last thing? I'm rather obsessed with climate change and really worried about it. And you read pieces from time to time about the ski business in New Hampshire, Vermont, and Maine. And I wonder if anybody talks about climate in terms of Donald Trump to you. Is that even coming into the conversation?
I cannot say that I've had specific conversations about climate and climate change specifically in relation to Donald Trump, but certainly, that's a topic that has come up a lot in terms of just the broader political conversation.
Yeah. Okay.
Stephen Porter, be well.
Thank you.
Hope to see you again. Thank you so much.
Thank you very, very much for joining us. We really appreciate it. We've been speaking with Stephen Porter, New Hampshire-based reporter for the Boston Globe. After a quick break, we're going to be speaking to the former chair of the New Hampshire GOP.
No, we're not.
We're not?
No, not yet. Not. She's not coming to 1. We're taking calls.
Oh, we're taking calls.
We're taking
Thank
calls.
you, Jim, for straightening
me out.
me
I know that's
up.
what you meant to say. What did you mean to say exactly?
I thought that Jennifer Horn was up next.
But what did you mean to say?
I meant to say we are taking calls at 877-301-8970.
That's exactly right. And no break.
You can call or text us. I've been neglecting the texters. We're going to get to those as well. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from Manchester, New Hampshire for the New Hampshire primary. Hey, Stephen.
We're not taking a break.
We're not taking a break.
We are a smooth-running machine, Marjorie and I.
Well, you're smooth. I'm not.
I am?
I walked into the glass this morning, Jim.
Yeah.
I think that says
By
it
the
all.
way, for those who she really did walk. There's the whole wall of glass here.
It's a good thing I have a big Irish head.
You did.
Yep.
Did you hit your head on the thing?
Well, I hit my nose, actually.
You did?
Yeah, I did.
Are you okay? I shouldn't
fine.
make fun of this.
I'm fine. No, I'm fine.
Yeah.
I bounced back.
By the way, I don't want to make you feel bad, but if I may say, everybody here, we have a lot of coworkers here. Everybody came in through the door. Do you know? Why did you choose to try to walk through the glass?
I don't know. Somebody really got the Windex
Yeah.
out. They cleaned it off beautifully. It just looked
Whoa,
clear. I thought it was.
I have an update, breaking news.
Yep.
Jamie just said our colleague Azita walked into the glass wall too.
Oh, there you go. I'm not the only one.
Okay, Tom in Manchester, New
only
Hampshire,
one.
you've been very patient. Welcome to Boston Public Radio. We're broadcasting live from Manchester, New Hampshire. Hey there, Tom.
Hi,
Tom.
thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Hello?
Hello.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, okay, great. Listen, couple things. A, I'm 70 years old. I've been, witnessing primaries, involved in primaries for a while around New Hampshire. I'm really disappointed that there isn't as much press coverage and candidate involvement here.
Yeah.
Because New Hampshire is unique in that we can get a lot of discussion going on about various topics that maybe aren't being discussed in larger media situations. That's the first thing. Second thing is that I'm disappointed that Biden isn't involved at all. And I'm concerned that there's not going to be a really cohesive kind of message by the Democrats to counter Trump's ultra-nationalistic kind of fascist idea. So I guess
Tom,
the
I
bottom
think
line
on the latter, I understand you're disappointed about Biden, but obviously the Democratic National Committee decided that this was not a diverse enough electorate on the Democratic side to have the first primary here. That's why it's in South Carolina. I sure as hell don't know what Biden's doing. We actually have his former press secretary, Jen Psaki, with us on Monday. We'll find out. I'm assuming Wednesday morning, particularly if Trump wins here and becomes the de facto nominee, that you're going to hear a lot from the Biden people. And thank you for your call. By the way, about the press, there's a story in the Globe today about the press. Usually, I went to the bar, I told you, last night when I got here. Usually it's flooded with reporters from all over the country. I don't think it's that they're not coming. There'll be fewer coming and probably only coming for the day before and the day of the primary itself. But it is disappointing because it matters, and it really matters. The one reason why one can argue, I think, that New Hampshire should be first, and I'm not one who believes that, is because of the voter-to-voter contact that Tom talks about, which for the most part doesn't happen.
Well, we were talking to a gentleman from the Doubletree Hotel, which is where we're broadcasting
Sean
from.
Monahan, the sales guy.
And he's quoted in the Globe saying, is this time around has definitely a whole different feel. And he talked about there's not as many national media outlets like MSNBC's Morning Joe. They used to broadcast up here.
Well, we've had Lawrence O'Donnell, a local boy, a Dorchester boy, on every 4 years. He's not coming.
Yeah, I think it may be. I mean, we're obviously from Boston. We have a lot of New Hampshire listeners. We have a lot of people that go back and forth between Massachusetts and New Hampshire.
There's only one primary. That makes a difference to, I assume, national media. It doesn't make a difference to us because it's a local race.
The Globe is talking about the Washington Post is not here this year, and the Radio Row, which is usually much bigger than it is, because it's more filled with national people, the local people, and I consider ourselves local.
We are local.
We are local, so I think it's a whole different thing.
Well, they're making a big mistake. Let's go to Chet.
Oh, I just want to read a text. This is we're talking about whether the Sununu's endorsement matters, Jim. I think it depends, obviously, on your politics. Listen to this guy. I'm a moderate. His name is Josh. No way I would ever vote for Sununu. Your analysis is not necessarily correct. Concealed carry without a permit, throw Planned Parenthood under the bus, abortion, deny federal unemployment benefits during the pandemic. He says Sununu's biggest achievement is price tags on market basket sandwich bags. No thank you to Sununu and his endorsements.
Well, for whatever it's worth, it's a pretty popular governor here in Massachusetts. By the way, CNN is reporting that Tim Scott, who, by the way, is from South Carolina, the exact same place that Nikki Haley's from, is endorsing Trump tonight. And if you missed it last week, Marco Rubio joined Senator Scott, where now the two senators from Florida have rejected Ron DeSantis, and they have both endorsed Donald Trump too, which I just do not understand.
Here's Bernadette from Nashua. I've worked the polls in Nashua every election since 2016. Please help the poll workers by reiterating that a registered Democrat or Republican cannot change their party affiliation on the day of the election, which is important. They needed to have changed by October 6th, as you pointed out, and she's hoping that repeating that on the air here and elsewhere will prevent a lot of voter frustration.
Yeah, if you're an undeclared voter here, you can vote in either primary. You can make that choice on Tuesday. Chet, we're going to try you again. Hope the connection's better.
Chet.
Hi, Chet.
Hey, can you guys hear me this time?
Perfect.
Yes.
Go.
Perfect. Yeah, so I wanted to just say that I was thinking about how there's kind of, you guys have been talking a lot about people voting for Nikki Haley as a way to defeat Trump, but I think we can all agree that there's very little chance that Haley beats Trump for the nomination. And in my estimation, I feel like the better Nikki Haley does, the more likely it is she becomes a potential vice presidential pick for Trump. And I think that a Haley vice presidential pick would potentially do the kind of, oh, well, there's the like reasonable stability person to kind of like bring Trump down and make him more reasonable or something. And I feel like that could help Trump a lot if he were to do that. So I'm a little bit concerned about people
Elevating Haley.
voting a lot for Haley and that happening.
Chet, thanks for the call. We appreciate it. I think it's very likely that Haley becomes the vice president.
Well, she's been very careful in her criticisms of Donald Trump, and people that have said, that he said horrible things about her, vice versa, have, changed their mind when it was about getting into his cabinet or getting their own reelection in order if they're Republicans. But, a lot of people are worried about that with Biden. Kamala Harris is not a particularly popular vice president, and Biden's age is a concern to lots of people. He's 81 years old now. If he's reelected, he'll be 86 by the end of his term. That's really getting up there.
You've heard the commercials. The Haley commercials say a vote for Joe Biden is a vote for President Kamala Harris. That's her part of her pitch. By the way, CNN is also reporting February 8th, which is pretty soon, the Supreme Court is hearing the 14th Amendment, Section 3, the insurrectionist cannot run for federal office thing. We're actually going to talk to Shannon Liss-Riordan a little later in the show about her challenge, her organization's challenge to Trump being on the ballot in Massachusetts. They had a hearing yesterday. She'll join us late in the 1 o'clock hour. Speaking of that, did you see we'll get back to your calls in a second. Did you see the post on Truth Social that Donald Trump put up? By the way, this is at 1:59 a.m.
About immunity.
2 o'clock in the morning. Capital letters, of course. Even events that cross the line, in quotes, I assume that means that are illegal, must fall under total immunity or will be years of trauma trying to determine good from bad. And a lot of people are interpreting that as an indirect way for the first time that he conceded his actions may be illegal. Even events that, quote, cross the line must fall under total immunity. The troubling part of that is not the content to me. The troubling part is he posted at 1:59 a.m. I mean, this is one strange individual. 877-301-8097 is the number. Louise, you're in Hollis, New Hampshire. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi. Thank you very much for taking my call.
Pleasure.
My question is...
Go ahead.
Hello.
Hello. That was
My
Judge
question
Judy.
is-
Yeah, go ahead.
Hello.
Hi, go ahead.
I
Please
did not
speak. Yeah, go ahead.
change over to undeclared.
Yeah.
I did not... I didn't
Okay. You didn't
change
do
over
the
to
undeclared thing.
And
Yeah, why?
And I'm wondering if I get the Democratic ballot and I write in Nikki Haley, will my vote count?
That's an excellent question, and I don't know what the answer to that. No, it won't
I
count.
don't think so.
Because that's a vote for her as the Democratic nominee. It's not a vote for
Yeah,
her as the Republican
You
nominee.
can't take
so
the
answer is-
Republican ballot.
No. She's not saying that. She said she's going to take a Democratic ballot because she didn't do it by October 6th. If she writes in Nikki Haley's name, does it count for Haley?
I don't think so.
Well, of course it doesn't, because she's voting in the Democratic primary, and you're casting one vote for Haley to be the Democratic nominee. So unfortunately, Louise, you're a little late. October 6th was the deadline to go undeclared. Thank you much for the call. 877-301-8970. By the way, in about 5 minutes,
a lot of people are asking this, actually.
What?
The same thing that the caller just asked, if you can write in Nikki. This is another Democrat who said it's too late for him to switch affiliations. Will that help?
Well, obviously, you can write it in. It's not going to help at all because you're voting in a Democratic primary, and that vote won't count, obviously, in the Republican primary. In about 5 minutes, we're going to be joined by Jennifer Horn, who's the former chair of the New Hampshire GOP. I believe she is no longer a Republican. She's one of the co-founders of the Lincoln Project, which was basically formed to stop Donald Trump. She'll be with us in a couple of minutes. But in the meantime, David, you're calling from Belmont, Massachusetts. Hey.
Hi.
Hi.
I know you've been asking about why Nikki Haley might take the position she's taking, and I wonder if you think it might be because Trump has courted white supremacist voters, and she's trying to straddle a line where she does not alienate white supremacist voters by acknowledging a racist history in America.
I think that's an excellent
Yeah.
analysis. I haven't heard a better one, David. I
You
don't
know,
know
I
if it's true, but thank you for the call.
And we were talking about this earlier. I mean, you've got to be really a vicious white supremacist not to concede that slavery was at the heart of the Civil War, or not to concede that America's a racist country. I mean, African Americans are 3/5 of a man, right? It's just
yeah, but see, I
kinda
think the way
crazy.
she could have straddled it is, and gotten away with it, and she hasn't asked me for my advice, is break the question down into two things. America, of course, has been a racist country at times, and cite some examples, and then try to make a case, which I happen to disagree with, that there's not racism now.
Well, she could say
but that'd be a lot more credible and a lot more.
I think it would be a lot better if she said there is still significant racism in the United States of America today, but I would say we are not a racist country. So she's not
That's a good
indicting
answer.
everybody. She could have done it that way. I mean, you got to be with all the stuff we've talked about since George Floyd, people can't concede that there's racism in America. With all the stuff we talk about all the time about the income gap, the wealth gap.
Well, I would argue if you can't admit that slavery was one of the causes of the Civil War, you probably can't admit that racism still exists in America. By the way, when you say that she can't admit that racism still exists in America, she admits that she encountered racism as a little brown girl, as she calls it, growing up in her town in South Carolina. So we've never been racism, but I've encountered racism. And the line she tried to straddle last night on the CNN town hall was saying, if you say we're a racist country, that you were basically causing young people to despair about their future. They don't have hope for the future, kind of thing.
I don't think that's got anything to do with
Nor
why
do
people
I.
might not have hope for the future. Their rent maybe a little bit more, trying to buy
More
a
of an
house maybe
issue.
a little bit more, and trying to get by in the very increasingly expensive United States of America.
Why don't we take a break?
877-301-8970 is the number to call or text that. We're going to try to get to as many calls and texts as we can. But up next, actually, I'm right this time, Jim.
You are right. Very soon
Up
she'll be with us.
next, we're going to be talking to the former chair of the New Hampshire GOP. That would be Jennifer Horn. Can't wait to talk to her. She is next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live from Manchester, New Hampshire today, Monday, and
This week on Under the Radar with Callie Crossley, an historic win for former President Trump in Iowa. Will he be first in Tuesday's New Hampshire primary? President Biden is not on the ballot, but Democrats are writing him in. And can the potentially 200,000 new voters on the rolls shake up the primary results? Our New Hampshire insiders weigh in. That's Under the Radar with me, Callie Crossley, Sunday night at 6 here on 89.7 GBH and the GBH app.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Lexus Broadway in Boston, presenting Girl from the North Country, playing in Boston this March. Written and directed by Connor McPherson, this new musical reimagines the songs of Bob Dylan, including Forever Young and Like a Rolling Stone. LexusBroadwayInBoston.com. And Concord Park Assisted Living. Recently renovated and expanded, Concord Park offers seniors the privacy and independence of their own apartment home, as well as care and support to meet their needs now and as they age. ConcordPark.org/care.
Trusted. Local. News. You're listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR. What matters to you.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim, Brady, and Margery again. Obviously, we're broadcasting live from Manchester, New Hampshire today, Monday and Tuesday. Tuesday's the primary up here. We're streaming all 3 days at youtube.com/GBH News, talking with some people I think you're going to hear on Monday, from Chuck Todd, next week John King, Jen Psaki, now at MSNBC, former press secretary to President Biden. Senator Scott Brown will be joining us. He's now got a pretty popular band up here in New Hampshire. And apparently our text line's favorite candidate, Vermin Supreme, I wasn't aware of now, is actually joining us. Our number is 877-301-8970. We're going to do it today and in the next couple of days that we're here. In between guests, we will take your calls. So feel free to call, and as soon as you have a break, you will be up.
Okay, liberals spending energy on trying to primary Trump speaks to the desperation of this moment for Democrats. We should be working on pushing Biden to recommit to the left and bring out the youth vote. He will not win without. And then this is someone who says she's voting for Nikki Haley in Massachusetts, though she's a progressive Democrat and doesn't agree with her about anything. But she does believe that Nikki Haley does not want to destroy democracy and become an autocrat. And at this point, the texter says, that is everything. My single voting issue. My sister is doing the same in New Hampshire. And this texter believes Nikki Haley could beat Joe Biden and will beat Joe Biden in a head-to-head where she thinks that Joe Biden could but won't necessarily defeat Donald Trump. And her breaks her heart, but she loves her country more than her liberal policies for the next 4 to 8 years.
In any case, we're about to talk to someone we've talked to a lot through the years. We talked to her as far back as when she was the chair of the New Hampshire GOP, even far enough back to when she was a member of the GOP, which she is not anymore. She's the co-founder of the Lincoln Project. If you don't know about, we'll talk about that too. Jennifer Horn, welcome.
Not a mentally stable person, and he can't lose. In his mind, he can't lose. If he loses to Nikki Haley in New Hampshire, he will try to burn the place down, essentially.
But obviously, you don't want him to win. We know that. It's pretty obvious, Jennifer Horn. And I saw you being interviewed by Katie Tur on MSNBC. You don't think Haley can pull this off in New Hampshire. Why?
I really don't. And, you know, there's a part of me that feels sorry for, all those voters out there who are looking at her as our last best chance to defeat Trump or something. But the reasons why are pretty basic campaign politics, like campaign 101. She has not given voters a reason to not vote for Donald Trump. None of them have. You know, she makes a great case for herself. There's no question. You know, I still have some traditional conservative values left in me, and I love her experience and her approach to foreign policy, to foreign affairs. But she's never given anybody a real reason to not vote for Donald Trump. First she started with vote for me because a couple of polls, a couple months ago showed that, maybe I could beat Biden in a head-to-head. And then on election night in Iowa, she tried to pivot from that to, kind of run against Biden and Trump as a twosome, and she talked about how they're both in their 80s and they both bring chaos and division everywhere they go. But there's no equivalency between Trump and Biden. And nobody who listens to her say that believes that there is. Even Trump supporters, I don't think truly in their hearts believe that. And she has been unwilling or without the courage necessary to confront Trump. She has never attacked him on January 6th, on inciting an insurrection. She doesn't talk about the fact that he's a confirmed rapist. She doesn't talk about the fact that he took $10 million into his private business from China while he was president. You can go through the list. We all know them. And none of them have had the courage to truly confront him on why he's unqualified to ever be president again. Or perhaps the fact that he is a sociopath. He's a crazy person. So I don't think that her message resonates. And in New Hampshire, even though they're more moderate Republicans, and you would think that they would kind of go for her because she's got this more traditional Republican experience and vision of the world, they're still pretty all in for Donald Trump. And I think the numbers in the polls show that pretty clearly.
Go ahead, Margery.
We've known you for a long time. As Jim said, you were co-founder of the Lincoln Project. Tell us about your trajectory. I mean, when I first knew you, you were heading up the GOP up here in New Hampshire. I'm not even sure if you're even still a Republican. Are you still a Republican, Jennifer?
I'm not. I'm a registered independent. Yeah.
So talk about this kind of crazy train ride the GOP has been on. And you are someone who was, until recently, part of it.
Well, by that, I hope you don't mean responsible for it. However.
No, I don't.
I actually got involved in politics for the first time when I was 44 years old. So I'm not a lifelong, political person. I came to it later in life than a lot of people do, and that was when I ran for Congress. And Jim Browdy interviewed me in the general election of that campaign and said, "Would you welcome President Bush to New Hampshire?" And I very naively said, "Yes, he's the President of the United States. Of course I would." And the entire state of New Hampshire rose up against me for that response. So thank you for that, Jim.
Sorry, I meant to call to apologize. I forgot.
I don't, but excuse me for my stupidity, but I don't get it. Why would the entire state of New Hampshire be so ticked off at that?
Well, in 2008, President Bush was not the most popular person in the world, and he was not the most popular person in the Republican Party. And I was in a general election against, a pretty liberal Democrat. And
Okay.
I'm not blaming you, Jim. I have
Thank
to take
you. I think you are,
responsibility
but
for
that's
my own
okay,
losses.
Jennifer. Go ahead.
Okay.
So to your question, I'll try to, in a nutshell, Margery, is I got involved in politics, later than most people do. I ran for Congress. I became an activist, and then I became chairman in 2013. So I had 2 cycles as chairman, and it was during the Trump 2016 election. I was finishing up my second term as chairman. And it's a bizarre experience to look back and it was changing right before my eyes.
Yeah.
And a lot of folks like to say, well, isn't this really the real Republican Party? Haven't they always been like this? And no, I respect that there are liberals and conservatives and we all disagree. But this is not what the Republican Party or who the Republican Party has always been. There is something in Trump, however, that has unleashed the worst in many of us. And for reasons that I think have to do with money and power, the Republican Party and the party leadership has fully embraced it. They have essentially, redeveloped the whole platform based on Trumpism. And I remind people as often as I can that regardless of what happens with this election, I do not believe, I think it's possible that it could happen, but in my heart of hearts, I don't believe that Donald Trump is going to become president again. But whether he does or not, the Republican Party is all in for Trumpism. The problems that we have with Trump are going to exist long after he is gone from the political stage.
And so does that mean that the Trump? I mean, I would call Ron DeSantis a Trump wannabe who obviously couldn't pull off the Trump Act as well as Trump does himself. So does that mean that post-Trump Republicans will try to do the kind? I don't mean commit felonies necessarily or rape women.
No, but I think that they will.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I understand what you're asking, and yes, I think that post-Trump Republicans, I think post-Trump the Republican Party will probably divide in a much bigger, there will be a more cavernous divide in the Republican Party after Trump is gone, because there will be those Republicans who look at Trump as successful. He can bring in funds, his demeanor, his approach to things. His hateful, I will say his hateful and vile approach to policy, especially policies that directly impact human beings, that is real for a lot of the Republicans now. I think that there will be those folks and then a smaller group who want to try to reimagine the Republican Party and start fresh, start over again. When he won in 2016, I said to a lot of people, we've got at least 25 years of having to deal with Trumpism in our party. It's going to take that long. If there are enough people in the party who want to return to honor and return to service and return to ethics, it'll take that long to truly rebuild the party and to regain the trust and the faith of the greater population of our country.
Jennifer Horn, former chair of the GOP in New Hampshire, former Republican candidate for Congress. What do you feel, other than believing that Donald Trump is an odious person, what do you fear most in a second Trump term, Jennifer?
First of all, I don't think odious is a strong enough word for what I think of him as an actual human being.
Okay.
I have genuine, deep concerns that the stability of our country is at risk, both economically, socially, and in foreign relations. I think that democracy is already under direct attack, not just by Trump, but by this massive, alt-right, far-right, and in many cases, just basic Republican followers that he has. One thing that we should understand about Trump that so many people keep ignoring is that he's not particularly clever. He's very open. He says who he is. He tells us who he is. He says what he's going to do. He thinks he's clever and funny. Well, I would only be a dictator for one day. Well, he's running a campaign for president on, getting back at his political opponents, at taking people down, at, he's attacking, not institutions of our country or our government that, are wasteful, but he's talking about, institutions of justice and law. And he is a direct threat to democracy in our country today. And the fact that he has a major political party that has fully embraced his message and his approach to policy as their platform makes him even more dangerous. Think about things.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Jennifer.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No, I can go on and on. You go
I know
ahead.
you can. Well, okay. So,
well, I have a question.
Okay.
So you're not obviously voting for Donald Trump. You've called Haley, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you have called her unethical and dishonest. DeSantis is there. What's your vote going to be?
Well, based on who's in the race right now, it's going to have to be Joe Biden. I'm not ashamed to say that. I'm not embarrassed to admit that. I'm a conservative. I'm right of center. And the thing I care about most of all is democracy, surviving in as strong a form as possible for my grandchildren. We haven't talked in a while. I have 6 grandchildren now.
You do?
And they...
Oh, my God.
6.
Wow.
I know. Go ahead and say it. I couldn't possibly.
I thought you were 29.
Yeah. But they feed my political position and my activism just as strongly as my children did when I was 44. And the problem with Nikki Haley right now, in the way that she's approaching this race and trying to, the way she's kind of trying to establish herself somehow as, the best person against Trump, is that she continues to ignore the truth. I'm not saying things about Trump that Nikki Haley doesn't know. I'm not putting stuff out there that's just like a figment of my imagination. Everybody knows the truth. Nikki Haley knows the truth. She knows that he was hoping for a successful insurrection. She knows that he tried to steal a legitimate election in the United States of America, that he was trying to intimidate and bully people into changing the vote numbers, trying to bribe foreign leaders into influencing the outcome of a presidential election. She knows these things to be true, and she is intentionally not addressing them, not confronting
Jennifer,
them. And when
by the way,
asked about them, she tries to blow it off.
Well, but she also wants to win, I guess. I'm neither defending nor criticizing her. If your analysis of where the Republican Party is in 2024 is accurate, and she has hopes of getting those Republicans to vote for her in a final, should she be the nominee, she almost has to do what you find to be unacceptable, is dance around the edges, because it is a MAGA, well, that's, again, whatever you choose to call it, to make sure that Trump-loyal Republicans don't sit home come November. I mean, that is true, right?
It is yes and no. How's that for a political answer?
Well, that's fine.
Yes and no.
Give us the yes, then the no. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I used to really admire Nikki Haley, and people like myself, her record in South Carolina, what happened after the shooting at the church and taking down the Confederate flag, and even her service in the Trump administration at the UN. She was a powerful person. She did a good, but that if you cannot bring strength and courage and truth to the table, then you are not qualified to be a leader. So yes, if she wants to win the votes of the MAGA folks, if she wants to keep them loyal to her so that if she can beat them in the primary, then she'll have them to back her up in a general election. then I can see where from a political stance, you would believe you have to do that. I actually disagree. I think that there is a hunger in the United States of America for truth, for honor, and for courage. And I think that a campaign that was based in that was properly executed, could win against Joe Biden, that could win against Donald Trump. But somebody has to do it first. All of these voters are an awful lot of these voters are sticking with who they think the winner is going to be, and who expresses the anger and the victimhood that they seem to believe they experience as residents of the greatest nation on earth. So,
Jennifer, let me ask you one last thing before you go. We asked Governor Hutchinson, Asa Hutchinson, this in the first hour. The Republican convention is in Milwaukee. I know you won't be there, it turns out, in mid-July. If Donald Trump has been convicted of felonies before July 15th when the convention begins, what happens in Milwaukee?
Well, it blows up, certainly. But so far, we saw this in the exit polls in Iowa. Over 60% of the Republican voters in Iowa said that even if he's convicted of one of these crimes that he's going to have to face in court, that they would still think he was qualified to be president. So I don't see Ronna Romney McDaniel taking any sort of courageous stand. I don't see most of the committee members. She's the chair of the party, and the committee members who represent all 50 states. I don't see them taking any particularly courageous stand. So, you're thinking how the clear-thinking Republican citizens of our nation might react to that. But in the end, at that point, the only people who matter are the folks in the RNC and the delegates who have been sent mostly to represent Donald Trump.
Hey, Jennifer, it's great to hear from you. Good luck and do well. Take care.
Congratulations on the 6 grandchildren, too, Jennifer. Thank you very much for joining.
Well, thank you. Life is good. You guys, take care. Have a great weekend.
Sorry for that question about Bush, by the way. I would really should never have asked.
That's right. You ruined her career.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Take care.
By the way, we're going to have a guy with us in a couple of minutes who is a Republican strategist in the state who's a Haley supporter.
Yes, we are.
He'll explain why he thinks she is the right one, unlike Jennifer's position.
I just wanted to read Rob's text. He says, I wonder if anyone has realized that if Trump wins the whole thing and becomes president, this will be the last primary season ever.
Jamie's been saying that too. We got to take a break, Margery.
We've been speaking with Jennifer Horn, former chair of the New Hampshire GOP and co-founder of the Lincoln Project. And we're going to be joined in just a couple of minutes by Jim Merrill. Jim just mentioned him. Jim Bradley just mentioned Jim Merrill, that is, former senior advisor to both Mitt Romney and Marco Rubio's presidential campaign. And nowadays, he is the New Hampshire state director of the Bernstein Shore Consulting Group. He's going to be with us up next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
I'm Arun Roth. Coming up on GBH's All Things Considered, residents are protesting a spate of pharmacy closures in Roxbury and Dorchester. A month after Wayfair's CEO Neeraj Shah called for personal sacrifices and longer work hours from employees, the Boston-based company is laying off more than 1,500 workers. Plus, we'll hear about a major drop in HIV cases among Boston's homeless population. Those stories and all the day's news starting at 4 on GBH's All Things Considered.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And New England Recovery Center, providing inpatient addiction treatment in state-of-the-art facilities located in Westboro, Mass. Learn more at newenglandrecoverycenter.org or by calling 1-877-MY-REHAB. And Q Legal, providing legal marketing solutions for law firms in Boston and beyond. Marketing strategies include websites, social media, video, and search. You can learn more about their services at qlegal.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. I am Jim Browdy. She is Margery Egan. Needless to say, we are broadcasting live from Manchester, New Hampshire today, Monday and Tuesday. We're streaming at youtube.com/GBH News and at the Boston Public Library if you want to watch with some friends and that sort of thing. We're joined now by Jim Merrill. Jim is a former senior advisor to both Mitt Romney and Marco Rubio's presidential campaigns. Nowadays, he's the New Hampshire State Director of the Bernstein Schur Consulting Group and a Nikki Haley supporter. Jim, it's great to have you. Thanks so much for being here.
Well, glad to be with you. Actually, I'm not a Nikki Haley supporter.
Oh, you're not?
I am neutral in this race.
Well, let me go back and say he is not a Nikki Haley supporter, and we're thrilled to have you. Great
I'm
to see
happy
you.
to be here. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure.
Okay, so you were a Romney supporter and you were a Rubio supporter, right?
I ran all of those campaigns here, yes.
Okay, so why are you neutral? Is this something to do with your position, or what's the deal?
Yeah, it's funny. As you kind of, as time goes on, you get really busy, right? I know what these campaigns take. I also worked on both of the Bush campaigns in 2004, and boy, it takes all your time, all your effort. I've got 17-year-old twins and a business to run, and so kind of you make a choice that, I think this time would be a primary ambassador and an observer of the process, having run several of these campaigns. So, and in any event, that's where I am this time around.
Okay, so you're a neutral guy, but you're an observer of the process. So
Absolutely.
tell us where you think we are then, right before this primary up here in New Hampshire.
Well, look, this is the best week in American politics, and I've gotten to live this multiple times, and this is really an exciting time. You see the activity out here. I'm a little bit late because I'm having trouble finding parking, right? There's a lot of folks in town, and so now you've really got a two-person race, right? Nikki Haley, Donald Trump. And, listen, Haley's the underdog. She's down. She's been fighting the way to get back into this race. She laid the groundwork here in New Hampshire very well. She ran a traditional New Hampshire campaign. The reason she is where she is because she did grassroots, she did town halls, she did the small and medium-sized events that we expect, and she outlasted all of her competitors. And so the fact that she's in striking distance today is part and parcel because of how she treated the New Hampshire process from day one. So, look, Donald Trump is definitely, he came into this as, quasi-incumbent. He had those things going for him, but there's a chance here for her, and so she's got to close the deal starting tonight here in Manchester.
Who are you voting for?
No, I don't talk about my vote.
Okay.
No.
You know what's interesting, by the way, we have quoted you throughout the show. You're in a Nikki Haley press release. You may not know this.
Oh, really? Okay.
In which you describe her as relatable.
Yeah.
Which I think in a campaign where Donald Trump, I think even his they do say he's relatable, but it's hard to make the case that he's relatable. I would argue Ron DeSantis most days is stiff as a board, not much of a campaigner. That is a part of her appeal. she does, even if one doesn't like some of her policy positions, she does have a real person aura more than her opponents, does she not?
It's a great point. And
it's your point, actually, just so
well, nice job, Jim. Good point I made there. But, again, being, not involved directly in this process, I saw her first. I've tried to go to everyone's events, and I've gone to everyone's events. I went to an event of hers in March. And it's early in the process, but there was a big crowd there, bigger than you normally see that early on. And I saw that relatability. And as we've seen here in New Hampshire, a big part of the process of being likable is being able to approach people one-on-one and having them understand you. And I think that's been part of the DeSantis struggle. There have been a lot of tactical errors there. But the truth is New Hampshire demands a level of intimacy that not every candidate is willing or able to give. And she's done that, and Trump does it in his own kind of unique, weird, way. DeSantis has struggled making that case.
Well, we always talked about that I would not call him charming. Certainly, you called Nikki Haley charming. Said she was also tough, and she has a backbone. It's a big. DeSantis, to me, has a big-time personality problem. He sounds very whiny. I don't think he's someone you could relate to at all, which maybe is part of why he's not even bothering here.
Listen, I think if we look back a year ago to where he was, Ron DeSantis was beating Donald Trump in survey after survey. And then again,
here.
Absolutely, yeah. And so I think it called into question this notion that Donald Trump is inevitable. Actually, you go back a year and it wasn't so. but there were some tactical decisions about how late he got into the race and the way he portrayed himself. And in the end, you know, if you look back in time at the candidates who've done well in New Hampshire, it's those that kind of open themselves up, right? Allow themselves to be a little bit vulnerable and maybe have a couple of those moments on the trail. And so, you know, you can go back and look. And again, I appreciate the Nikki Haley folks quoting me, but I'm just trying to be objective about who I've seen and how they've engaged New Hampshire. I think, and Chris Christie did the same thing, and I've always given him credit as well. He ran an extraordinarily intimate campaign in New Hampshire. Didn't pay off for him here, but he clearly embraced the process, and that's part of being able to succeed here.
You know, it's remembering opening yourself up and being vulnerable. Remember the great moment with Hillary Clinton in the Obama race when she
that was in Portsmouth, New Hampshire.
Yes, and she was tearful almost in a interview there. I don't remember what she was talking about, but she almost started to cry. And I remember Buchanan coming rushing in to us, who was, of course, running then as was he a Republican then or an independent then? I'm not sure what he was. But anyway, coming in and saying, people have to stop being mean to Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
He was not exactly her political friend.
Well, I'll give you another example that was less reported on, but I witnessed firsthand, and it shows how, you know, in New Hampshire, there's no bubble, right? I mean, there's this raw interaction between voters sometimes. And if you recall, you go back in 2007, we brought Mitt Romney to the Red Arrow Diner, just up the street.
Yes.
We come down the stretch.
The question in Portsmouth, a woman by the name of Marianne Pernold said, how do you do it? And the CNN referred to it as the chick question, meaning how do you endure all this? And I guess it elicited that kind of response. So
and of course she won. She beat Obama
and
in
she
in
did.
New
It was
Hampshire.
a great story.
Yeah.
So we mentioned your two former clients here, campaigns you ran in New Hampshire, Marco Rubio and Mitt Romney. Marco Rubio the other day made it a clean sweep. The two United States senators from Ron DeSantis' home state have now endorsed Donald Trump, who I guess lives in Florida now, so there's some connection. Mitt Romney made a comment. He just forget criticizing Trump, which he's been doing, I think, eloquently for years. He said, and you never criticize a voter if you're a politician. He does not, I'm paraphrasing, he doesn't understand how voters can vote for a rapist. And as we've discussed ad nauseum on the show, while he was found liable for sexual abuse under New York law in the Eugene Carroll case, the statute is odd, and the same behavior in Massachusetts, for example, would be rape. How do you explain people people who, I assume everybody cares about their family and their mothers and their kid and their whatever.
I don't know if everybody does.
A lot of people, most people do. A jury found him to be liable for sexual assault. Forget defaming this woman nonstop, including while he's sitting in the courtroom. How is that forgiven by people?
Yeah, here's my best guess, because I don't understand it either. Okay, I don't. How I understand this, I think what happens is with Trump, there's so much smoke. There's just always, and we saw it when he was president, there was just every day it was exhausting, the amount of news and stories and things that were happening. And I think that, you know, that case gets, you know, kind of conflated and lumped in with like the other four cases that have, you know,
the criminal cases.
Correct. And so I think that from a Republican voter's perspective, they kind of dismiss it all. This is all just fake news. This is like, you know, the legal proceedings. There's a bias here. And so I don't think there's the ability for folks to critically think like this case, let's set it aside. This is serious, and everything else is kind of, it just gets part of the smoke screen that goes around him, kind of. So.
Well, you know, it's interesting. Sununu and Nikki Haley always talk about the chaos that Trump brought, and we have and I think it's a very effective line because the old saw, you know, usually in the olden days, you know, Bush would win, Kerry would win,
Peaceful
Gore would
transfer
win.
of power.
Well,
Right.
it wasn't just a peaceful transfer of power, but you could forget about the president for days, if
That's
not
right.
weeks at a time.
Right. That's exactly.
And every day in
Right.
Trump's presidency,
In
you're
your
waking up
brain.
in a panic. And I think that was very draining for a lot of us.
Well, it's funny you say that because I recall I was in studio at WMUR giving kind of in between. They had the candidates coming in 2016 and giving little one-offs. And Michael Bennett, I was in 2020. Michael Bennett came in.
Oh yeah, he was a good candidate. He
Yeah,
didn't get far.
And
I liked
Michael
him.
Bennett, and he said, the best thing about me is part of his 1 minute shtick is the best thing about me, you'll forget I'm president. And I was like, there's something there. There was something there. So, yeah.
By the way, just so you know, since you haven't been with us before, our powers of prediction. We interviewed Senator Bennett. I guess it was 4 years ago. We said this guy's
Loved
got
him.
a future in
Loved him.
presidential politics.
Loved him.
So
But you
we
know
are
what
not
I remember?
exactly Nostradamus when it comes to
But I do remember
presidential primaries.
when we were up here last time around, well, actually, it was 2016, not 2020, obviously, but I just remember right at this very hotel, the candidates are all buzzing around, all the media's buzzing around. There was Jeb Bush standing all by himself,
Outside the hotel?
with no one, not an aide, nobody. And I thought, ooh, this doesn't look good.
Please clap.
Yeah.
So Jim Merrill, before you go, who's going to win on Tuesday?
Look, I think that Haley's positioned herself to at least have a chance at success. She's going to have to really maximize the undeclared turnout. I think right now Trump's on we see the spread. I don't think it's 15, but I never believed it was 7 like UNH said about a week ago. I think Trump's on a path to victory here.
Okay, next time you come back, if we say you support Nikki Haley, you have to support Nikki Haley. That's okay. So get with the program.
All right, I'm sorry I
You
blew that.
really
I know.
screwed us
I know.
up.
I
I'm glad you
Jim,
get to
was a
spend
pleasure
some
to have
time
you. Thanks so much for your
with
time.
the
Thanks for having me.
17-year-old
Thank you so
twins.
much.
They probably appreciate
Yes.
that dad is not running around working 90 hours a week. So
It's much better this way. I
Yeah,
agree.
I bet.
Good to be with
well,
you.
Jim.
Take
Thank
care.
you very much.
Thanks so much.
We've been speaking with Jim Merrill. He's a former senior advisor for the presidential campaigns of Mitt Romney and Marco Rubio, and now he wants to spend a little more time with his family. And he's New Hampshire State Director of the Bernstein Shore Consulting Group.
We're not taking a break.
We're
just
not
gonna
taking a break.
No,
We're going
we're-
right to Shannon Liss-Riordan. Okay.
She's a labor lawyer. She's been with us. She was as recently as last week. She ran for the Democratic nominee for Attorney General in Massachusetts. And she's working for the group trying to get Donald Trump removed from the Massachusetts ballot over his actions on January 6th. Shannon, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
All right. Thank you so much for having me.
So explain to people exactly what you were doing, Shannon. What is this all about, this effort?
So we represent 9 objectors, Massachusetts voters from across the political spectrum, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, who are objecting to Donald Trump's inclusion on the primary ballot for presidency. The U.S. Constitution, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, prohibits candidates who have engaged in insurrection. So anyone who has taken an oath of office to support the Constitution and has broken that oath are not eligible to run for office, and that includes the presidency. So we have filed a challenge. Sure.
No, you go ahead.
We filed a challenge with a state ballot commission, and we are asking them to hear our challenge, which they have the statutory authority and responsibility under Massachusetts law to hear challenges like this one.
And you had a hearing yesterday, which we're going to ask you about in a minute. But just for context, I assume most listeners know this. Colorado Supreme Court ruled him off the ballot as per their interpretation of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. The Supreme Court, I believe, announced this morning it's going to take up this one of these cases. Maybe it's an immunity case around him on February 8th. But when the Secretary of State in Maine knocked him off the ballot, a judge a couple of days ago stayed that ruling until the Supreme Court ruled. She's appealed it again today. Even if you prevail in this thing, Shannon Liss-Riordan, isn't the greatest likelihood that some judge says we're going to put a stay on the ruling of the ballot commission to exclude Trump until the Supreme Court rules on the issue?
Well, we don't know what might happen if this case gets to court. We just know that under the Massachusetts rules, there is a very specific time frame that this kind of challenge needs to be brought. A hearing on such a challenge cannot begin before this coming Monday, January 22nd, and the ballot commission must issue its decision by 5 p.m. January 29th. So under Massachusetts law, we can't wait for the Supreme Court to rule. They're not hearing arguments until February 8th. And we hope that the U.S. Supreme Court will address this issue head-on the merits, and being the good textualists they are, apply the 14th Amendment as it was written. But we don't know what the Supreme Court's going to do. They could decide it on broad grounds. They could decide it on narrow grounds and decide there was something fluky about Colorado law that can dispose of that case. So meanwhile, we're pushing forward with our challenge under Massachusetts law.
You know, we read also that obviously Trump's lawyers are objecting to the Ballot Law Commission even hearing this case. Can you, in non-legalese, tell us what Trump's lawyers' arguments are?
Trump's lawyers' arguments are just making things up, frankly. So we're preparing to file today our legal memorandum to the Ballot Commission explaining that the law in Massachusetts is perfectly clear, that it has jurisdiction and indeed responsibility to hear exactly this type of challenge. It's heard, historically, the Ballot Commission has heard these kinds of challenges to candidates not being eligible for the offices they serve. For instance, there was a challenge to Mitt Romney being on the ballot for governor based on a challenge to his compliance with residency requirements. The Ballot Commission resolved that and decided that he did meet the requirements and thus he could appear on the ballot. There have been other similar challenges that the Commission has adjudicated.
You know, we asked you this when you were kind enough to come in the studio with us a few days back, Shannon Liss-Riordan, but many people have argued, we quoted, I think, David Axelrod, then, of course, was a big political strategist for Obama, architect someday of his presidential win, who's argued that this would be a disastrous situation to have judges say that the president should not be on the ballot. Obviously, he's not a Trump supporter, but that it would be much better for the country going forward if voters decided, not the Supreme Court. So what's your rejoinder to that?
My argument to that is that we are a nation of laws. The highest law of our land is the U.S. Constitution. Under the U.S. Constitution, Trump cannot serve again as president. He can't be on a ballot. So, yes, democracy obviously requires voters to make very important decisions about who serves in office, but a series of laws that are enforced by courts and entities such as the Ballot Commission have rules they have to enforce about who is even eligible to run. So, for instance, Barack Obama, plenty of Democrats may be happy to vote for him, would like to see him on the ballot, but he can't be on the ballot because he's disqualified under the Constitution since he already served 2 terms.
Yep.
Similarly, Trump is disqualified under the Constitution because he engaged in insurrection on January 6, 2021.
Shannon, thank you
Keep
very
us
much
apprised, Shannon.
for
We
being
really
with us.
appreciate your time. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
We have been talking with Shannon Liss-Riordan. She's Massachusetts labor lawyer working with this group, Free Speech for People, the group pushing what we were just talking about, the Massachusetts Ballot Commission effort to exclude Donald Trump from the Massachusetts primary ballots. We're going to be talking later in the show, right before the end of the show, actually, we're going to speak with Lieutenant Governor Kim Driscoll. She's up here in New Hampshire working with the governor, Maura Healey, on this write-in effort for President Biden. You're listening to Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live today, Monday and Tuesday, from Manchester, New Hampshire, and we are streaming on youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Today on The Culture Show, the Bay State's big Emmy wins. With a handful of Massachusetts natives claiming awards this week, we take a minute to bask in their reflected glow. Then it's headlines from the Lost and Found department. From a Picasso going up in flames to a stolen Picasso being recovered by police, we look at how valuable physical artworks remain in the age of AI and NFTs. Finally, we preview the upcoming Oscar nominations. That's on our Arts and Culture Week in Review, today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And the Lowell Institute, presenting a film screening of Inundation District January 20th at 7 at Suffolk University. A post-screening conversation will follow with filmmaker David Abel. More at lowellinstitute.org. And Sony Pictures Classics, presenting The Teacher's Lounge, a new film by Iker Chatak about a teacher whose life begins to unravel when thefts begin at her school. Now playing only in theaters.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. I'm Jim Browdy. She is Margery. Needless to say, we are lucky enough to be in Manchester, New Hampshire, at a fabulous studio off the lobby of the Doubletree Hotel in downtown Manchester. We're here today, broadcasting today, Monday and Tuesday, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News, obviously leading up to this incredibly important primary. On Tuesday, it streams on, did I say this? youtube.com/GBH News, or you can just go to the Boston Public Library and watch the monitors. In a couple of minutes, we're going to talk to the president of the Manchester NAACP, James McKim. He was with us 4 years ago. And before we say goodbye, we're going to talk to the Lieutenant Governor, Kim Driscoll, who is part of the effort with the mayor of Boston, the governor of Massachusetts, her colleague, and Kim Driscoll herself, to get this write-in effort for Joe Biden moving. We're about to be joined, actually now, by a guy. Hi, it's nice to see you again. It's been 4 years. We're joined now by the chair of the Manchester, New Hampshire NAACP, James McKim. James, it's great to see you again.
Good
Thanks
to see
so
you
much
again.
for being here.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining us. So,
Great.
you know, we hear this constantly. We shouldn't be having the first primary of the nation here in New Hampshire because it's not a diverse enough state. Now, we, of course, love it because we get to come up from Boston, and it's really fun and hang out here at the hotel and go to the bar at night and all that kind of stuff.
That's right. Get
But-
some fresh air.
But that's
You know,
right.
he
get some
crushed
fresh
us like
air.
a bug when we tried this argument with him 4 years
Well,
ago, by the way.
it's 4 years ago. We're going to try it again
Try it
today.
again, try it
So, what do you say to that?
Well, I say to that a couple of things. First of all, I would challenge anyone to find a state that is representative of the United States.
Okay.
So that claim that New Hampshire isn't representative of the racial demographics in the United States just doesn't hold water.
It's not just racial demographic.
It's not just racial.
Biggest city, 115,000 is Manchester. I live in Cambridge, has 115,000. But
Yep.
go ahead.
So the other thing here is I think there are places in New Hampshire that are representative of other places around the country. And so it's been a testing ground for a number of years. And if you look a little bit more closely at the demographics of various places in the state, you can get a sense of what the rest of the country might vote like. For example, in Census Tract 15, right here in Manchester, New Hampshire, the demographics there are very similar to what the rest of the country is.
Okay. But it's not, to Jim's point, there is not like this big urban center that we're not talking massive numbers of people. It's not
Right,
the big
right.
urban-rural divide that there is in much of the rest of the country. Illinois is a state that keeps being pointed out by people as a much more diverse state. I assume you don't want the primary to go there, but they are diverse educationally, religiously,
Right.
you know, urban, rural, race-wise. There's much more diversity there.
I'd say it's a matter of size, a
Okay.
matter of volume. I mean, and then we're talking about New Hampshire versus South Carolina. South Carolina doesn't have that same broad set of demographics that you might expect in other places as well. So as we kind of talked about, I think last time we were around, it might be more interesting to have a group of primaries together, have South Carolina, have
Yeah.
New Hampshire,
Love that
all in
idea.
one day, right? And that's actually much more representative of the country.
We're going to try this again in 4 years, James, so you can prepare. You know, James.
Well, no,
one-
you forgot what one of the texters just said,
What?
that if Trump wins, this is the last primary
Ever.
Ever.
That's right.
Ever.
You know,
Right,
James, we've talked a lot on the show. I don't know if you saw Nikki Haley's town hall last night on CNN.
I did. I did
with
see
Jake
some of that,
Tapper.
yes.
And the thing I thought on many issues she did a pretty good job. It's not my brand of politics, but I thought she was pretty impressive. And to use Jim Merrill's line from a minute ago, relatable. The one area that I don't understand, that Margery doesn't understand, that maybe you can explain to us. We all know the thing about not mentioning slavery was the
Yep.
cause of the
Mhm.
Civil War
Mhm.
a couple of weeks ago, and then she danced around that afterwards.
Yep.
Last night when Jake Tapper asked her the question about, you said this is not a racist country, it's never been a racist country, and Jake Tapper said, you know, how can you say that? Her answer was, well, Declaration of Independence, all men are created equal. The drafters of the Declaration obviously didn't intend anybody to be treated unequally, and of course we've said it 3 times in the show.
Right.
Most of us who didn't fail history know that roughly, I don't know, a third, if not more, of the drafters of the Declaration were slave owners.
Right.
So she's a pretty smart woman. So she obviously knows that's not true, I would argue. I don't mean to try to read her mind. Is there a New Hampshire Republican voter who needs to hear Nikki Haley deny the history of racism? I mean this sincerely, to vote for her in the primary over Donald Trump? Who's she appealing to in New Hampshire?
So, number of questions.
Well, answer them all. Go ahead.
That. First of all, I think she was in a very difficult spot with that question because a way she could answer it that might appeal to those who don't understand the way that people in the South think would offend them. And if she answered it, if she'd used the word slavery, folks in the South would have been up in arms. She answered it technically correctly, that it was about government, but the government was trying to support slavery. So she didn't get into enough detail.
Well, how about this no racist history thing?
Why would people in the South be up in arms about the use of the word slavery?
Because they're racist.
Okay, you're talking about white people.
Not all of them.
Well, one, they're trying to get out of that discussion about being a racist.
Okay, but how about this has never been a racist country, which she doubled down on last night?
That, I think, is where she made the mistake. And it all has to do, I think, with the founding fathers who, when they were around, they used the words all men were created equal to mean everybody. But, of course, we know now that all men really didn't mean everybody. Didn't mean women, didn't mean blacks, didn't mean really all people, which is what we would like for it to be.
They meant what they said, that all men
they meant what they said.
All white men are created equal.
All white men, yes, exactly, were created equal. So the Constitution was written for white men. And that's why we have amendments to the Constitution, because we've learned over time that it can't be just all white men.
Yeah, but James McKim, I don't mean to give you a headache, but I hear that, and I appreciate your analysis. I still can't picture the New Hampshire Republican voter who needs to hear her deny the history of racism in this country to vote. So
there isn't
So
one.
this is just for future primaries.
This
is for
this
Super Tuesday.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
She's looking forward. She's looking forward.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Actually.
So let's look forward. What do you think is going to happen on Tuesday?
What do I think is going to happen on Tuesday? I think it's going to be a battle royale between Nikki Haley and Donald Trump
you do?
For Tuesday.
So you think it could be
do
close?
So. I think it could be close. I think what we hear from a lot of the media, and you all are good media folks, but there seems to be so much emphasis on Trump, Trump, Trump. We see him a lot of the time. We see him more than we see the other candidates. So I think it's and as this is the case in many primaries, it's a popularity contest.
Yep.
Right. But I think Nikki's been here. She's been here over and over again. She has Chris Sununu backing her and taking her around the state, and that means a lot to the Republicans here.
So, as you know, the demographics that were critical to Joe Biden being elected are not as solid as they once were. Black women, who were the primary reason Joe Biden is president, are as solid as they ever were. Black men are not nearly as solid as they were. Young people are not as solid as they were. What is and by the way, it's not just abandoning Biden, it's supporting Trump. What does a black man see in Donald Trump to prefer his candidacy to that of Joe Biden in your estimation?
Well, I think I'd start with black men are not monolithic.
Of course.
And so when you ask the question, what does a black man say? I can tell you what one black man.
Well, those black men who've decided to flip from Biden to Trump, that's what I'm talking about.
I think they are seeing someone who has confidence and is willing to shake up the status quo. And the status quo for many black people has been we're underrepresented. We're not given the freedoms and given the access to services and the rights and recognition of the rights that we have. So I think that notion that that Trump is going to come in and just change things, just blow it all up, is what's appealing to them.
Yeah, but it seemed to me, if his last term's any indication, he'd blow it up in the wrong direction.
Well, I think many people also are very short-term in their thinking.
Yeah.
And don't have this wide purview of the arc of justice, as we say.
So, James McKim, before you go, it's great to see you again, by the way. Thank you so much for your time. The Biden write-in effort, we're going to talk we hope we're going to talk briefly to Lieutenant Governor Kim Driscoll, who is part of the Healy-Driscoll effort for the write-in, and we obviously have Mayor Wu we're going to be talking to tomorrow about the same effort. She's coming to New Hampshire. How's that going in your estimation?
I think it's gone really well. I'm seeing the emails. Emails are going out through so many distribution lists. Social media has picked it up. I think it's going well. I think what's interesting is the write-in campaign that's starting up for the ceasefire.
And what do you think of the state of that? How do you think that's going to do?
Unclear. I think it's going to be big among young folks. I'm not so sure it's going to be big amongst adults and across most of the state.
If people want to learn more about the Manchester branch of the NAACP, which you happen to chair, how do they find out? Is there a website?
We do have a website.
What is it?
That website is manchesternaacp.com, and we're also on Facebook at Manchester NAACP as well.
James McKim, it's great to see you again. Thank
Great,
you so
great
much.
to see you
Thank
all.
you so
Really
much for
appreciate
taking the time.
Sure.
We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
We've been speaking with James McKim. He is president of the NAACP Manchester branch, or the NAACP Manchester branch, and we again appreciate very much his time. After a quick break, we're going to
No
be...
break.
Oh, no break? Okay. Sorry.
We're going to take calls.
We're going to take calls.
And we may be joined by Lieutenant Governor in a couple of minutes. We're not sure, but we're going to take calls. A lot of people have been really patient. James, again, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. 877-301-8970 is our number here. It is Friday, needless to say. Tuesday is a primary that I think is a make-or-break primary myself. I don't know how you feel, Margery, but my take is if Trump has a landslide, which he did in Iowa, and even if it's a close race with Haley coming in second, I think it's pretty hard to suggest that Trump is not the de facto nominee of the Republican Party.
Well, on another note, Jim, this is a texter who's having flashbacks to the 2020 Manchester primary when the texter and her friends had stalked out that hotel bar, had lots of fun seeing newsies and politicos, briefly met you and me, Jim.
They did?
And they'd never heard the show at that point. But my sister, says the texter, had been listening for a long time. However, she talked about it. She was thrilled to meet you. I thought it unusually rude of her to say to Jim that she liked Margery better than Jim. But now that I am listening to the show, I get it, having since become a devoted listener.
That is really so heartwarming. What's that person's name?
I don't think they signed their
Well,
name.
she's blocked, so that's good.
Yeah.
In any case,
Okay.
877-301-8970. Jan, you're calling from somewhere in Massachusetts. Thank you for calling in. Welcome.
Hi, thank you so much. I just have to tell Margery, I just pulled into Fall River across from the Old Harbor Mall. So I was
Oh, my gosh.
here.
Yeah, I know the Old Harbor Mall.
What's up?
So I've moved to a wealthy white suburb west of Boston, and I'm a white mom of an adopted black child. And while this is not scientific, it's more than anecdotal. The amount of white older people or middle-aged who tell me that there's no racism is mind-boggling. So I'm afraid to say that I think the reason for Trump's popularity is that he's made it okay for a large amount of people to hate or feel that racism, and that Haley realized she could not go against that. And it's very depressing, but I'm afraid that I feel it's true.
You know, I am no political strategist, as we said to Jim Merrill before, but I think of all the things I know about Nikki Haley, the one thing that causes her to have most appeal to moderate people in this country was her relatively courageous decision to take down the Confederate flag after the murders in that church. And, you know, it's so odd to do that, and admittedly that's as a governor, and then do this, Jen. And your analysis may be totally right, but doesn't it feel to you that they don't fit together?
It does, because I did like her. I thought but to hear what she's saying about the causes of the Civil War, I mean, it's so frightening.
You know, Jan, we only have a couple of seconds left, but I'm wondering how old your son is, and I assume your son has confronted racism in that western suburb?
Yeah, it's my daughter. She's 12, and
12.
She's had white kids her age run up to her and say, I don't think Black Lives Matter. She's had the N-word thrown at her.
Oh.
And we're supposed to be in one of the most educated towns in the country.
Yeah, I'm sorry,
to hear
Jan.
it, Jen.
Yeah.
Thank you for your call. We appreciate your perspective.
Very much appreciate it. Okay, the number I'm not going to give the number anymore.
Give the number.
877-301-8970.
Don't give the number.
If the people want to call.
Don't give
We're going to
the
be talking, I believe, with the Lieutenant Governor.
Or not, it
We're
appears.
not?
I mean, she's fairly busy, it
How
appears.
come you always know what's going on and I don't? Am I not getting the signals? I don't know.
I don't think it's getting
it's
the
on the
signals.
screen.
No, I think it's receiving the signals that is the
is it
issue.
receiving the
If
signals?
you know what I mean? By the way, if you just tuned in, which is a huge mistake on your part, and again, I don't mean to mock her, is Margery started the show by walking into the glass wall here.
Hey.
Oh my God, after saying we're probably not going to get to talk to her, joining us is a woman who is in New Hampshire for some climate forum, which makes Margery very happy, and
Yes,
me too.
absolutely.
But is also part of the Healy, Driscoll, and I guess Wu and other effort for to get Joe Biden written in on the ballot on Tuesday is Lieutenant Governor Kim Driscoll. Lieutenant Governor,
Yep.
thanks for calling in.
Yep.
Hey, Jim. Hey, Marjorie. How are you?
Hello, I understand you're joining us up from St. Anselm College at that climate solution. So what's going on?
Well, we're talking about some of the work that's underway in Massachusetts to try and build a more resilient future, really trying to think about all of the resources that are available at the federal government, how we can use them, and showcasing some of what we've been doing in Massachusetts. We've got some great work from a climate bank to leveraging infrastructure and investments to help communities at the local level make sure they're more resilient. As we know, we just saw this past weekend an angry ocean. So the more we can do to work together, the better on that front.
By the way, Kim Driscoll, just to make you happy, the other day, a guy who's now working full-time on Client, the former fellow mayor of Somerville, who you crushed every year in our news quiz, was on our show with the wonderful work, and the president of Vineyard Wind. Kim Driscoll, why should people write in Joe Biden in a state that the Democratic National Committee said should not be the first primary?
I mean, this is the easiest choice possible. I'm here talking about climate. We've got amazing federal resources coming to help all of our communities, all of our states. And besides that, something called democracy is on the ballot this year. If we really care about being able to have a planet in which it's greener and certainly less carbon going into it, if we really care about maintaining the rights, privileges, and freedoms that are under the Constitution, I think the choice is clear. And so we're happy to sing it from the rooftops in Massachusetts, in New Hampshire, to make sure people understand what's at stake and why re-electing Joe Biden is going to provide the sort of resources that we need at every level of government, and particularly as we tackle climate together.
Are you worried? I'm sorry, go ahead.
What does a re-election of Donald Trump, who is a climate change denier, mean for the climate efforts,
and we have
Lieutenant
1 minute,
Governor
Kim Driscoll? Yep.
Huge setback. I'll speak for Massachusetts, offshore wind. Like, we're making major strides in offshore wind. The day Joe Biden took office, those are the sorts of efforts we need to make. We need to go big to make sure we're thinking about how we build a more resilient future. Someday our grandkids are going to ask us, Marjorie, what do we do to fight climate change? And we need better answers. And re-electing Joe Biden is going to help us get there.
Kim Driscoll, we really appreciate your time to call in. Thanks so much. Good luck with your work. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, guys. Talk to you soon.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us. Okay, we are done. I believe. I haven't gotten any signals telling me we're not.
No, we're not.
We're done.
Why don't you give the phone number?
I'm not going to give the phone number now.
All right, the show's over.
I can read the clock, Jim.
How much you like, in all seriousness, how much you like being here?
Oh, I love it. Are you kidding me? I love it.
Come on up for the weekend, too, by the way. If you're thinking of it, if you want to see democracy in action, small d democracy, whichever party or non-party you're a part of, this is the place to be. It's great.
Okay, tune in on Monday. We're going to be back here with some great anecdotes of what went on over the weekend up here. We're going to be broadcasting live from Manchester, New Hampshire, Monday and Tuesday, talking on Monday with the former White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki, New Hampshire, did I pronounce that right? Jen
Psaki, yes.
New Hampshire Congressman Chris Pappas, former Senator and former Ambassador Scott Brown. Remember Scott Brown?
I talked to him the other day. I do
indeed. Big
Huge band. They're playing Monday night for the RNC, by the way.
Easy on the eyes, that's Scott Brown.
Well, that's your
Used to
opinion,
always bring a dozen donuts to Jim Merrill.
Okay, go ahead.
Hancock, New Hampshire's finest naturalist, Cy Montgomery. We can't wait to talk to her. We're going to actually visit her and trick us into joining us maybe here at the lobby of the Manchester DoubleTree. Our crew, Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss. Our engineer is John the Claw Parker. Our executive producer is Jane Bologna, who did not get locked in the Manchester men's room, at least not today.
Not yet.
Special thanks to the crew that's been so helpful up here in Manchester. Maddie Geyer, Rob Fragnet, Azita Garamani, Howard Powell, Miles Smith, Stephen Clifton, and Dana Rader. We really appreciate your efforts in getting us.
And by the way, we're going to the Haley rally tonight in Manchester.